Good morning to you all here and welcome to the 2025 Deloitte Economic Dialogue, the 2026 National Budget Discussion. A very warm welcome to our very special audience online via Zoom and YouTube. You're joining us live from Movenpick, Accra, Ghana. My name is Na Ayele Kome and I work with the Tax and Regulatory Unit of Deloitte, Ghana. Before we begin, by way of a few housekeeping rules, please take note that all your mobile phone devices should be on silent. We would have a dedicated Q&A session after our panel discussion. We would pass around mics for that. And for our online participants, you would have the chance to type your questions. Please note that this is a hybrid program. Very soon, our online participants will be joining us. The session as well will be recorded and made available online. The exits, as you can see, for those of us in person, are directly behind you. The washrooms are to your left once you exit, which is mine right, if you need them. By way of a brief outline of what we can expect today, we would have a number of back-to-back presentations to begin. 3 of them, in fact, and I promise you it will be very short and very precise. We will take the keynote address from a representative of the Ministry of Finance, after which we will hear from someone who is actually very well known to us, a professor, and then finally Deloitte would also provide its own perspective on the 2026 budget. Now, as we have promised, we would also have what is likely to be a very, very interactive panel discussion right after we are done with the presentations, and then we'll be done for the day at about 12 noon. Last Thursday, 13th November 2026, the Minister of Finance presented to us the 2026 budget statement and economic policy. Since then, I'm sure you agree with me that there have been a number of discussions on various media about it. But I think, in your opinion, whether or not you think ATO is forcing or not, you would find that this particular discussion we would have here today is going to be perhaps the most authoritative that you have heard. Without further ado, I think I've talked enough. Without further ado, please help me welcome to give us the opening remarks, the managing partner of Deloitte Ghana, Daniel Owusu. Let's put our hands together for him, please.
Good morning. Oh, good morning. And a round of applause for now. Thank you, Anna. Yeah, let's give a round of applause for now. Good morning, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, and honored participants. A very warm welcome to the 2025 Deloitte Economic Dialogue, a forum where we have insightful discussions and share knowledge on the key fiscal and economic policies from the 2026 budget statement. Following the 2026 budget statement delivered by the Minister of Finance under the theme Resetting for Growth, Jobs, and Economic Transformation, we noted that the budget focused on 3 strategic priorities, and I will note them. Consolidating microeconomic stability, accelerating economic transformation and job creation, and note that's very important. Strengthening security and social sectors for inclusive growth. We are gathered here to discuss the key policy statements and the implications for us and our households. The Deloitte Economic Dialogue has become a vital platform for thought leaders, industry experts, and policymakers to provide insight into the economic direction of the nation, as well as obtain feedback on key initiatives of the government to unpack what the future holds for us. As a firm, we have chosen the theme, Charting Ghana's Economic Path, Policies, Progress, and Opportunities, to ascertain the progress we have made as a people and discuss policies and opportunities within the 3 strategic pillars that was outlined in the budget. As we have seen, Ghana's economy has shown a level of optimism throughout 2025, following a period of micro-adjustment and reset. The implementation of the IMF Extended Credit Facility Program, together with domestic policy actions by the government, has begun to restore stability and rebuild confidence. And someone said, if the fundamentals, I don't want to continue. The journey towards robust economic transformation, however, remains ongoing, with structural reforms and prudent fiscal management still required to consolidate these gains. The budget statement included policy measures aimed at strengthening domestic revenue mobilization, rationalizing public expenditure, and enhancing commitment to fiscal discipline. Also notable is the government's intention to commit 30 billion Ghana cedis this year to the Big Push infrastructure program aimed at accelerating infrastructure development and strengthening regional connectivity. This will support increased productivity and economic activity across our dear country. For the business community, the consumers, the proposed reforms to the value-added tax regime is a welcome news. The implementation of the reform is expected to result in a reduction in the effective VAT rate to 20%. These reforms are expected to ease the burden on businesses, stimulate investment, and support job creation. The reforms are therefore welcome to us and our businesses. We will closely track the implementation of the 24-hour economy initiative and the accelerated export development program, which aim to boost productivity and drive inclusive growth. Also, Ghana's current public debt position, although improved, continues to require management and adherence to fiscal responsibility rules. I'm happy the government's budget team seeks to reset for growth, jobs, and transformation. Despite the macroeconomic gains chalked thus far, we cannot be complacent as a country. Important questions remains. On progress, we must ask ourselves, are we satisfied with how far we have come, or are we ready to push further? The journey towards sustainable growth is ongoing, and together we must unify around a single purpose to ensure sustainable economic growth and resilience. On policies, the government's key initiatives such as the 24-hour economy and the Big Push present significant opportunities. But how do we ensure these policies are connected to the real economy to create jobs and alleviate poverty? How do we build real resilience against external shocks? On opportunities, in this era of transformation, are we alert to recognize and seize these opportunities? The responsibility lies with each of us to remain vigilant and responsive. As we deliberate today, let us challenge ourselves. What more can we do to drive progress? How can we translate policy into tangible impact? And I say tangible impact. How do we create those tangible jobs for the masses that we see gathering everywhere. To conclude, our ideas, experiences, and insight are invaluable, shaping our collective understanding of the opportunities that lies ahead. That is why I urge you all to actively engage in today's session as we discuss the policies and their implications on us. Let us seize this moment to work together to make progress and chart Ghana's economic path. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for being here today, and let us commence this year's Deloitte Economic Dialogue with a shared commitment to driving Ghana's sustainable economic recovery. I want to appreciate and my gratitude to all our invited speakers and panelists who have joined us this morning. Dr. Kesel Atuforsen, I understand, has to be in Parliament to defend the budget that we're talking about, and so we wish him well. Thank you, Professor Vara Fiado, for coming. Mr. Sanyo Hosi, my friend, sometimes people say you can go off, but you are still my friend and my brother. Never mind. Professor Bokin, a friend of our firm, thank you for making the time to be with us. To all our attendees, in person and virtual, we appreciate the time taken to be part of this purposeful gathering. Your presence here demonstrates the shared commitment to drive progress as we work together. Thank you for your participation, and God bless our homeland, Ghana. Thank you. At this point, I will kick off, and as I said, the Minister of Finance has to be in Parliament, and his rep is here to present the Minister's keynote address. And with a round of applause, we want to receive the representative of the Minister of Finance, Mr. Akes, who is a key person. Let's give him a round of applause as he comes around. When I read his background, he has had over 32 years at the ministry. So another round of applause for him. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hearing 32 years makes me feel too old at this stage. And all protocols observed, let me send the heartfelt apologies from my minister, Dr. Kesel Atuforsen. He is not only the Honorable Minister for Finance, but also the Acting Minister for Defense. And that should tell you the various challenges in terms of his time. He would have loved to be here because this is an economic dialogue, and he would have loved to have explained the budget that he presented. But he has sent me here to speak and read this on his behalf. He first would like to appreciate Deloitte for putting this together and then bringing the budget statement home to each and every one of us so we can explain it in simple terms and communicate with all people. I stand before you here to also present some issues. I think the previous speaker said I had spent 32 years, but I wanted to tell you that years before then, we started the issue of having the budget statement. Previously, from independence, it was only the budget. So that was more from the accounting perspective, adding the revenue expenditure, and then you get the approval for it. But 40 years ago, we started the issue of the budget statement and economic policy. And that economic policy contest is what today's dialogue is about. And you realize it's economic dialogue, but it's dealing with the budget statement. So coincidentally, we are in the 40th year of having economic policy as part of the entire budget that we have, which is based on the 1992 Constitution, in present times. Now, just to provide for you what informed the theme, and the theme is resetting for growth, jobs, and economic transformation. So the triad of growth, jobs, and economic transformation. But why did we start with growth? It's because, in simple terms, if you want to test your economy's strength, test the health of any economy, in one figure, economic growth reigns supreme. It's a simple indicator that encapsulates almost everything. You realize that when we mention the budget, revenue, in real terms, we say revenue as a ratio of GDP. When we say budget deficit, we say ratio of GDP. When we say debt, we say ratio of GDP. When we say growth, we say growth of GDP. So having growth as a key important dynamic is extremely important. Now, in addition to this, I will mention something to you which I'm not sure anybody has observed. But I'll bring your attention that historically, we've been showing the GDP in Ghana's budget statement in cedis. But when you want to do international comparison, there's no other country that has GDP in cedis apart from us. And every country has its own GDP in its own currency. So when you want to do international comparison, you express them in what? Usually US dollars. So we can compare your strength against the others. Now, exactly 10 years ago, Ghana's GDP in dollars was about 49 billion US dollars. Now, when you add that to our population of 30-something, you have a per capita income that at the same year was 1,756. Now, because we crossed 1,000, we became a middle income, but a lower middle income. Today, one of the key things on the economic performance in 2025 is pointing to the direction that Ghana, for the very first time, by the end of 2025, which will be calculated next year by April, will stand a pole position to hit $100 billion for the first time in our history. At the same time, it is possible that the per capita 10 years ago below $2,000, of course it's around $2,000 now, could hit above $3,000 also for the very first time, inching us away from the median to the higher level of the lower middle income. So if we mention growth as a key part of the theme, these are the fundamentals that I think our discussions here, looking at the rich resource of people here, we are going to make justice to that. But growth on its own does not answer the question. The distribution of growth is important. The contributors to growth is important. So you'll notice that the budget is trying to bring each and every one of us from diverse angles to also contribute to the growth. In some countries, they use the GNP, but we don't have it here, so we have the gross domestic product to guide us. Now, on the same angle, you have the second block of the theme as jobs. Growth without jobs is meaningless to you and I. So again, the theme for 2026 budget is highlighting that beyond the growth, jobs are also very key position that government intends to look at. And this is driven by Article 36(1) of the 1992 Constitution, where economic objectives of what the state should do for its people is highlighted. So the theme is not just there on its face of economics, it also has a legal dimension of responsibility of the state to its people, and you identify that in the second block. The third one, and I think this is where our previous speaker made a lot of discussions on it, with regards to economic transformation. He made reference to 24-hour economy. He made reference to the issues relating to the big push. In fact, in broad budgeting, you call that mega projects because they have characteristics that are not the same as procuring an essence of coming here for a session. So the economic transformation provides a means to an end, and at the same time, it's an end on itself. In public financial management, sometimes we make mistakes where the means to an end becomes our objective, but it is just a means to an end. And there are many elements in the budget that is positioning economic transformation that is a means and also provides an end. And I'm sure by the time the panel comes into place, we will be having many more. Checked the panel discussions here. If I've spent 32 years of work, each one that is going to be on the panel, I have almost an individual 30 years experience with them. So in total, we are talking about almost 200 years of experience that will be assembled here to provide very logical, very concise, very simple answers to everything that the 2026 budget presents to us. Ladies and gentlemen, on this note, on behalf of the Honorable Minister for Finance, we present the highlights of the 2026 budget statement. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Ackers. I think we can do it one more time. We wanted to give ourselves a few minutes to ask Mr. Ackers some questions. This is supposed to be a dialogue, yes, and it's over 32 years of experience, as we saw evidence in the keynotes that he gave to us. And so, Mr. Ackers, if I could kindly request, would you like to sit to do this? Or you could come back to the lectern, please. Your mic is there as well. Yes. Thank you. So I will kickstart with a few questions for you, but I would also want, while I'm asking him the questions and while he's answering, please put together your questions as well. We'll give ourselves just about 5 minutes to the floor to ask a few questions. But just to quickly kickstart, right? We have all seen a very impressive macroeconomic outturn in 2025 so far, and some analysts have already suggested that the GDP target of the 4.8 that was earlier indicated seems a bit too modest. And the view was also further reinforced by the investments we are seeing in key sectors such as infrastructure, energy, and agriculture, which are areas that we think would be useful for propelling growth. Basically, what is the government's perspective on this view? Do you think it's too modest?
Not that I'm going to refer to the document. When you have questions like this, you can refer to document, but it gives you comfort that you have some knowledge you can refer to. So I will gladly accept that. Thank you very much, Madam, for that. Yes, you made reference to 4.8%, but I would like to provide a contextual position for that. For most of you, I hope you are aware that when you take Ghana's crisis a few years ago and the debt restructuring that was done, no country in Africa has ever done anything like that before. When you go also to the Asian economies and you look into the global world, from the 19th century to date, any country that goes into a crisis of this nature, usually you'll be seeing growth for almost a decade a bit subdued. And if you remember, when the IMF program was done in 2023, we actually had a target of growth of 4%. We revised it, but you notice that in the IMF budget document, it was 1.5% of growth. But we made, at that year, something close to double of that. IMF understood the Ghana's economy, GDP, can be resilient. So they were able to give us 0.5, shy of what you observe in other countries. That is the rule of the time. So we hit that, almost double. And this year, we targeted 4%. Q1, Q2, 6.3, 6.3. In pure economics, that looks like an outlier. But it provides a condition that the potency of economic policy was vibrant to hit against what has been the normal. We are minded about international perspectives. We also minded about what our domestic economy can do. So we also chose our words very carefully. When you watch how we project the GDP, we always say not less than. When an economist says not less than, it means he's anticipating more than. That less become the floor, that at the minimum, against any shock, that will be the case. So the GDP we have forecasted is not a point target. It is behaving like the way we do for the inflation. The inflation, if we say 8%, we look at +2, -2. It's the same reason we targeted 11.2 inflation for 2025. That was point target, but we are already at 8. When you take off 2 from 11, we are around 9 point something, and that is the same as the 8. So yes, it is a position which is more of a tactical one, a strategic one, a cautiously optimistic position, and nothing stops us from outperforming it. And I believe strongly we will outperform it, as the analysts have identified. But this is the basic understanding of why we chose that figure. Thank you.
Hands together for Mr. Akers. I think that's a pretty good explanation. So we'll be expecting more than the 4.8, not less, yes. Second question, please. And please be preparing your questions. We'll give ourselves just about 5 minutes to ask questions, so you can prepare your questions as well. Given that this 2026 budget is meant to drive notable transformation, you would see that in most of the contributions for sectorial development, right, there's very little change from what we've had in the previous years. Even with the major transformative 24-hour economy policy that we have, you would see that agriculture, industry, and services are expected to contribute 22%, 31%, and 47% respectively to the GDP over the period 2026 to 2029. Is there any explanation for why the sectoral contribution to GDP has been projected to remain largely the same over the period 2026 to 2029 relative to the 2025 results that we have seen, even though we expect the government's planned initiatives to result in, again, notable transformation in the economy? What do you think is the explanation for it?
Thank you very much. Maybe I think we'll go and redefine the question. Because when you said the sectoral, you only divided it at a very high level of agriculture, industry, and service. When you go a bit into the disaggregation, there are major sectors that are sub to it. And not all of them are performing higher because it's not affecting them. And I'll give you one example. The extractive industry, if you look at it, you look at crude oil production, had gone less, but it is inside industry. And it will be pulling down those shares. It will be pulling it down because if you watch it over the past few years, it's been growing below par and in sometimes even a negative. So what that means is that some of the disaggregation will be accelerated by what you actually mentioned. When you go also into services, you notice that a lot of government activities and government spending are in the services arena. So when government is having its fiscal consolidation, you realize that that side may not be going up as you think. Then the other sectors, subsectors, are taking over. And that is where the sections that you mentioned, with government support from palm to cocoa to cashew to rice to poultry to the eggs to the 24-hour economy. By the way, the 24-hour economy is affecting all the three. So if they all move together, it is still transformational. It is a quantum of leap that will be key on that score. So if you want to relate that to the shares, over time, don't forget that these shares don't change automatically. And also be mindful of the statistical nature of what you are referring to. That GDP is based on 2013 activities. And for GDP, almost every 10 years, the economy transforms. And that base must change to reflect the new direction of things. So there are certain drags within what you have at this moment that will change when the Ghana Statistical Service changes the base and the calculation of the GDP. So it is still consistent. What you're observing today will not be the same when all that information come out. And I will draw your attention to pay attention to the subsectors, and you will see that there are various levels of drag and push that gives you the outcome that you see.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. I have a last question to ask you, but before I do that, I want to throw the mic to the floor. If anybody has a question for Mr. Akers, let's quickly take that. Just one or two questions. I have a hand here. Yeah, two hands here. So we'll take two questions quickly. I will come back to Mr. Akers with my final question. I think a lot of my clients will be very interested in that question, so I'll get back to you on that. But let's take two quick questions from the floor, and then my final question to Mr. Akers.
Good morning. My name is Edward Akanyamike Jr. from the Ghana Hotels Association. I'm interested in the effective VAT rate that has been mentioned in the budget. We were doing 15%, which could be reclaimed, then 2.5, and then the 1% COVID. From what we heard in the budget, what it means is that it's just a 1% COVID-19 levy that was taken off. And the fact that now the NHIL and the GET fund can be reclaimed. We are a bit uncomfortable with that. We're hoping for a standard VAT rate of about 10%. 10%. So I am interested in knowing what went into the decision to level it at a 20%. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. When you started, I thought you had answered the complete question. I did not find what the question was, but your last question is you were expecting a further decline. Now, let me provide the context of this. As part of the economic framework, because we are doing economic dialogue, there are certain indicators. That we need to make sure we are able to meet at all times. One of them, from a debt financing point of view, is the debt to GDP ratio and external debt service to revenue. Again, secondly, Ghana has gone for almost 10 consecutive years, more than a decade, of a tax to GDP ratio between 13 to 14%. The average benchmark should have been 20. When you look into an economy like ours, striving to be an emerging economy, you should be able to build your revenue higher within the 20s. That means when the economic activity is 100, we're able to collect as much as 20 from that. For a government that is trying to pursue that, It is not easy to remove, you mentioned, from 15 to 10, in addition to 1% of COVID. Effectively, 6 percentage points from a VAT point of, or indirect tax of 21. That is a big one to be done in any country under any circumstances. But the budget was bold enough to identify the challenges of the current VAT structure for businesses like you. Non-reclaiming the GET Fund and NHIL meant a sales tax in addition to a VAT. But we left sales tax many years ago, in the 1990s. Why are we exhibiting a characteristics like that today? That alone will not only help you in terms of reduction of tax impliedly, because you can reclaim it. It also will make it easier for you in your tax and auditing calculations, instead of doing a different structure for the VAT and different structure for those other two items. Then, in addition to that, the COVID one is completely taken off at this time. In economic management, where we need more money, non-debt money, for some of the projects that has been mentioned there, this is the furthest that the government can go. As we progress, one of the best way of taxation is the personal or direct income tax, not indirect, because indirect can lead to inflation, and I'm sure that's where you are referring to. As we evolve and transform, and we can rope more people into the direct taxation, it becomes a very good point to deliver what you've said. So for now, I think you must congratulate the budget for what has happened to make your business, as long as it comes on, better, cheaper, more efficient for you, pay more taxes now, be more compliant, do more economic activities. So at the end of the day, this comes at a cost to the budget. We can easily be able to fill that on. So that is what I can say on that position for now.
Final question. Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I want to quickly revisit the question on the sectoral contribution to GDP that Na asked, and I need you to provide a quick clarification. Perhaps it's already in your answer, but some further clarification will be. So if you look at the sectoral contribution to GDP, services still dominates, as has been the case over the years, still contributing between 45 to 47%. And the contribution by the other major sectors, two sectors, has not changed that much and is projected to remain same over the next 4 to 5 years. I understand your point about rebasing, but my concern here is that we've always seen this structure and identified it as not being very efficient when it comes to job creation, because services is a low, has low job creation potential. That has been the discussion in the time past, that we need industry and agri to be a bit more dominant going forward to create the jobs. So should we be worried that this structure seems to be maintained going forward, or are you saying that by the time the economy is rebased, we will see the statistics show differently, where agri and industry begin to command more in terms of contribution to GDP, and then give hope to all of us that we are on a path to solving our job problems? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think here, people like Prof, who have been doing a lot of articles, will come in at this stage. But let me explain to you. I'm not sure anybody had said that having a structure where your services is dominant presents weakness on job creation. When countries are in its formative stage, they are predominantly agrarian. And when you look at the previous calculation that you had on growth, you have realized that that's the previous GDP. You have seen that when you take cocoa, you have seen cocoa and marketing. That marketing is service. But when we did the rebasing, the servicing component of cocoa was highlighted as part of service. So if I take the current classification and I send it back in the past, you'll be surprised that agriculture will not be 50%, because at independence, agri was 50. But within it, had some of these nuances. So again, if we want to interpret those statistics, we need to be a bit careful about that. The real, if you take current classification and take it back, agriculture will not necessarily be the strongest, right? Because you've put down anything on service onto the service position. And then never underestimate the job creation point of services. In fact, all those who are trading online, that is service. You know, as years go by, and at independence, our population was 6. We are now 5 times that. And in countries that move from one stage to the other, less of their people are in the primary sector, agriculture. So I'm not sure that the basis behind our argument is to go back to the agrarian stage. But the basis is to ensure that the contributors to the growth across all the 3 is maximized. We cannot change people that they should live online and go back and do other things they used to do before. It is where the world is going. And in fact, there's even a new dimension of GDP that is going to come across. It is from the digital AI. Is our GDP measuring the AI component of our work? The answer may be no. So even the growth we have may be understated based on the current activities of things. So what you are seeing here has this context, has this understanding. With the rebasing, some of these elements will come. There's nothing wrong with that. But the point is, how do we create jobs along with our massive growth over a number of years? And that is where policy dimension, with your help, is seeking to achieve. But I believe that my colleagues in the academia have been doing a lot of more work from the academics on this, so they can provide what the literature is saying, and then the dimension is moving. But from what I can recall in my history of work, is this position I've given you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Can we put our hands together for him one more time? So I'm not able to ask you my question, unfortunately. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for making the time to take questions from us. Isn't it impressive? He's actually asking for more questions. So imagine that. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's only fair that for the people who prepared the budgets, we give them ample time to explain it and address questions if the need is. And also we would hear from Professor Bobkin shortly. He would also have his say, as has already been mentioned. Before we continue, I just want to quickly acknowledge a few people in our midst. We are all very important, but there are some few big people among us. So please help me acknowledge the president of the Ghana Hotels Association, Dr. Edward Akanyameke. Thank you for coming. We also have in our midst the CEO, the Chamber of Oil Marketing Companies, Dr. Riverson Opong, in our midst. Thank you for coming. We also have in our midst the Executive Secretary, Importers Exporters Association of Ghana, Samson Asaki Awengobet. Thank you, sir. We also have in our midst the CEO of Chamber for Bulk Oil Distributors, Dr. Kweku Ofori. Apologies. We also have in our midst CEO of Chamber for Corporate Trustees, Mr. Thomas Esso, in our midst. Thank you for coming. The president of the Chartered Institute of Insurance Ghana, Dr. Solomon Latte, in our midst. Okay, I think he stepped out. We also have finally in our midst the head of finance at the National Insurance Commission, representing the Commissioner of Insurance, that is Mr. Mahama Wayo, in our midst. Okay, I guess he's somewhere around here, but thank you all so much for coming. As you can tell, this dialogue has perhaps the biggest people who can talk about economics in Ghana here, and the next speaker is actually somebody who is well known to us. He's an economist and a professor of finance at the University of Ghana. He's been there for over 18 years. And he has practical industry, government, and multilateral agreements, engagements experience so far. Professor Bobkin combines 3 broad principles or disciplines of accounting, finance, and economics, and interrelations between them in his teaching and research and has contributed significantly to a lot of discussions on the economy of Ghana. Please, let's put our hands together for Professor Bob King.
Good morning, everyone. All protocol observed. Okay. All right. So the minister had said a lot of the things that I wanted to say. So I don't know whether we're all maybe copying from the same notes. Of course, maybe it will be from the budget. With the same budget. So we moved away from just budget presentation to budget and economic policy. That's very important. So my presentation, I'll look at a bit of context and then is this thing working? Okay, so an introduction, context, macroeconomic stability. We say in economics, macroeconomic stability is like fresh air. When you are denied fresh air, you get to see the implications, right? That was what our former vice president told us. And then we look at debt sustainability. Within our economic framework, you always have to talk about debt sustainability because since independence, public debt has caused us a lot of problems, simply because of how we've managed the fiscal side and then also the money printing that comes along from the central bank. So what we experienced recently is what we call debt-induced macroeconomic instability. Right, and therefore to correct that, debt cannot be isolated. So we had to do debt treatment, which took the form of debt restructuring and all of that. So when you present budget economic statement, it has to respond to certain fundamental dynamics. So this is our population from now to 2050. By 2040, our population will be 45 million. About 30% of that population, they will be less than 30 years. Between now and then, annually, we are adding over 700,000 to our population. In fact, some people just added to that number last night. They were not counted. So good news. So this is the direction we are going. So we're going to have a bit of more youth, even though that will decline. So it means that whatever proposal we make must respond to population demographics. And you see how this is playing out in terms of what the So you see how this is playing out in the numbers in terms of development challenges. So my expectation is that the 2026 budget should respond to this. It has to address unemployment, right? So we have 13.4% or so of our population that are successfully unemployed, right? So between 2012 and 2023, this economy has added just 250,000 jobs within this period. So it means that we've seen positive growth, but it's been largely jobless. Meanwhile, within this same period, 2.7 million people have been added to the labor market. And annually, aided by free senior high school, we are adding over 500,000 to the labor market annually. So whatever growth we are projecting, whatever economic dynamics must respond to jobs. It has to be job rich. Then that is why we are saying that if you look at the growth that we have celebrated, they were not driven by in labor-intensive subsectors of the economy. And therefore, we've seen positive growth, then we've seen unemployment. But what this also means that because growth is not diversified, it's not inclusive, there is greater upward redistribution of wealth. And a good way to understand that is to see our level of inequality that is at crisis level, right? So inequality measured by the Gini is around 44%. A certain level of inequality is good. If it's below 10%, it's good. Above 10% is counterproductive, right? So we are doing currently around 44%. So our projections and GDP numbers must respond to that. As we speak, 25.9% of our population are successfully poor, extremely poor, right? So what it means is that we are just not looking at growth. We can't just say we are doing well. We should be interested in how many Ghanaians are lifted out of this poverty. 30, 40 years ago, this was what China decided, that their growth must be people-focused. and they said they were going to eliminate poverty. China used to receive support from the world in terms of giving their poverty and the rest of them. So growth has to address all of this, and that is how I'm looking at the 2026 budget. Of course, we also need to appreciate the 2026 budget within the context of IMF-supported program. What you see here is not people's date of birth. These are just when we entered IMF program and then when we exited. So currently, we are firmly under the direction supervision of the IMF, right? That program will end somewhere middle of next year, but that is where the risk is. So one major risk I see in this 2026 budget is that I didn't see a clear exit plan beyond the IMF-supported program. The budget to straddle part of the program and then beyond. We know how Ghana behaves when we are under IMF-supported program and when we exit, how we behave. So one would have expected that the budget will go beyond just the economic policy and the rest of them, give us an exit strategy. Is there going to be a technical extension, let's say about 3 months? We've seen the way Zambia went, and of course, how Sri Lanka also, remember, 2022, 2023, Ghana was mentioned consistently within the same line like Zambia and the rest of them. So we need that, given that, and also when you read the budget, it's not just 2026 budget, it gives us a 3-year outlook. So we needed to see how government was going to navigate that. That didn't show up clearly in the budget, and I'm sure government will have to look at how they will de-risk that. This thing is taking almost. So again, 2024 was almost a repeat of 2016. Remember 2016, we had entered into an IMF program. 20 months later, we had a general election. 2024, we had also entered into another IMF program. Remember, these two people have been alternating in the last 12 years or so. Okay, so then 19 months later, we entered into another IMF-supported program. So then again, you see why the growth projection is very low at 4.8%. That is not Ghana government growth projections. That is from the IMF program. Is that okay? Of course, the IMF will tell you that it's Ghana government program that they are supporting, but we know that the projection is coming more from that. So before this government took over, the IMF, together with the previous administration, had outlined a growth projection from now to 2029. Is that okay? So budget, we are just copying from that and then putting it in the budget. That's what we have here. But clearly, the IMF position is that it's better they under-project so that they exceed that target consistently, and that is what they've done. So going forward, so that gives us a little bit of context. I can skip this in the interest of time. So 2024, a new mandate. 4 priority areas outlined, economic restoration and all of that. Then we'll see how they sought to execute that. So these were the growth target for 2025. To deliver that, you need revenue, right? So revenue underperformed. That gives us context to understand why government is recalibrating the fiscal framework for 2026. So in the time past, you realize that revenue shortfall did not constrain Ghana government from spending the way they want to spend, because the difference will be explained through borrowing. Now there's a change in that. Government is working hard to live within its means. So you can see in the first 3 quarters, the shortfall in revenue was supposed to do 127 billion, we did 122 and all of that. But the icing on the cake is how government is managing the expenditure side. So far, revenue shortfall is around 7.7 billion Ghana cedis, but they sought to undo that through higher, can somebody help me with this? They sought to undo that through higher or greater expenditure cut. So government applied essentially 3 strategies in the 2025 budget: fiscal recalibration, essentially moving the fiscal consolidation from revenue-based to expenditure-based. So there are 2 ways you achieve fiscal consolidation. You either do revenue-based or expenditure-based or mix. The problem we had with the IMF-supported program was that it was heavily revenue-based, and we felt that that would hurt the economy more. So what the government has done from 2025 is to actually recalibrate the fiscal framework from revenue-based to expenditure-based. So you see that there's greater expenditure cut to drive the fiscal consolidation rather than pushing for more taxes and higher revenue, which is very good. Then they also administered what they call shock therapy. That's medicine. it has its own side effect. We'll talk about the side effect very briefly. So the shock therapy essentially was to reduce our gross financing needs, which essentially means that government will borrow less. There will be less in the market in terms of accepting treasury bill auctions. So the shock therapy immediately caused treasury bill rate to what? To drop significantly. And that itself is also aligned with their fiscal consolidation. So the results of the shock therapy is a fiscal savings of over 8.8 billion Ghana cedis in lower interest payment from the first 3 quarters of this year, right? All part of the expenditure containment. So that is good. So it means that government doesn't have to burden businesses and the rest of them through more taxes, but they could still achieve their fiscal consolidation objective through expenditure cut. This is the first time, actually since 1992, that government has decided to live within its means rather than explaining the revenue shortfall through higher borrowing. And I'll show you why, and that is why you see our debt to GDP ratio has decelerated much faster than the program a roadmap under the IMF-supported program. But the next important question is, can we continue on this path? Because when we see the side effect of the medicine you are administering, when the side effect tends to be more, what do? You readjust. So the 2026 budget tries to readjust a bit, right, so that they can cut growth. So then the other bit that they also did was the fiscal consolidation, fiscal framework that they entrenched. So you can see why our primary balance actually ended up with a positive of 0.7% of GDP as at the first 3 quarters. In fact, we have done more than what the IMF program stipulated. We promised to do 1.5% of GDP. Primary surplus, we are doing currently around 1.6%. But remember that to do a primary surplus of 1.5% means that you have to do a lot of expenditure cuts. Okay, now we will see how this is playing out. If somebody is helping me, can we go to the next slide? Okay, so this is Ghana relative to Sub-Saharan Africa. So you can see that historically, our revenue to GDP is below the Sub-Saharan African average. Under normal circumstances, that should constrain us from spending. Go to the next slide. And you realize that even though we have dwarfed revenue mobilization, it doesn't constrain us from spending the way we want to spend, because the difference is explained through borrowing. This time around, that has changed. Go to the next one. And then you see how in crisis moment, our inefficiency is magnified, right? So you can see Ghana's average deficit relative to Sub-Saharan Africa and then low-income developing countries average. So you can see COVID here. You see the blue line, that's your country, right? It's as though COVID only originated here, right? So people say COVID. Other countries manage it at lower cost, right, compared to what we did. And therefore, of course, given that it was also an election year, it's just like fish. When it's swimming in the sea, you can't tell whether it's sipping some of the water. So you can't tell whether the 2020 election excesses was election-driven or it was what? COVID. In any case, the deficit, we are paying for it. Okay, so what have they done as part of this? They've amended the Public Financial Management Act just to give a legal base for this, which is good news. What have they done? So we hope to achieve debt to GDP ratio of 45% by 2034, right? So the calibration is that a primary surplus of 1.5% should help us achieve a debt to GDP ratio of 45% by 2034 or lower than that. But bear this in mind, if you have huge infrastructure deficit and you promise by law to do a primary balance of 1.5%. If your revenue is not doing well, then you have to cut what? Expenditure. But we need also government to spend appropriately to stimulate what? Growth. So that is the tricky point government has to what? Navigate going forward. Because stability, after 2 years or so, people will look beyond stability. And they will ask for growth, they will ask for job-rich growth, and all of that. So that is what I've done. Then they've also promised to establish the Independent Fiscal Council. What is the side effect of this treatment? So you can see that, so look at GDP growth from the expenditure point of view. You can see that GDP growth from expenditure point of view was driven more by private consumption or household consumption at 8.2% compared to 5.5% growth in 2024. But however, from the government side, the government is the biggest consumer in the economy. So if you look at GDP from the expenditure side, it shrunk from the government side, which is a reflection of the steep expenditure cut. So we are seeing stability. People are celebrating it, but it's coming at a price. The price is that we are sacrificing some growth that could have come. But in the interim, we will say that is a good price, provided that we will use the fiscal space for growth-enhancing spending going forward. So you can see that GDP from government side actually shrunk from 4.6% to 3.7% in 2025 for the first half. What you also observe is that in terms of expenditure, we've seen a dip of about 0.2% of GDP in the second quarter. Then again, can we go to the next slide quickly in the interest of time? So if you look at high-frequency data, monthly basis, look at what is coming out. So you can see that on month basis of high-frequency GDP data, July GDP growth for 2024 was 8.3%. Do you see the corresponding July for 2025? What growth are you seeing? We are seeing 4.5%. Okay, so you see the sharp deceleration, right? So it's a reflection of the impact of fiscal consolidation in the immediate. The sacrifice is growth. Now, this gives us an understanding why, very soon you understand why in 2026, government decided to increase its CAPEX allocation from 33 billion to 57 billion. Because they've realized that the draft expenditure is holding back growth, and you need to correct that through progressive spending. So that is what they're trying to do. So they want to generate revenue. I mean, they are looking at 268.1 billion from that economy. But at the end, they bear this in mind. Since independence, there has not been any conscious drive to grow a taxable economy. Okay, so even though we relate our tax revenue to GDP, we are not growing a taxable economy. You first need to put a strategy in place to grow a taxable economy, and that economy will deliver sufficient tax revenue. Let's go to the next slide and see what we are doing. So this is our economy in one template. So agriculture in the last 15, 20 years has contributed about 20.98% to GDP. Look at the tax revenue from agriculture, it's less than 1%. Okay, so a bigger chunk of the economy called agriculture is not taxable. It's not taxable. Remember, there are some aspects of agriculture, as the minister's rep spoke about, that is captured in service. But when we talk about agriculture in its purest form, its tax contribution is very low. But it's not a case, it's a choice. Go back to just, stay here. Let's flip our mind to Ivory Coast. Flip our mind to Ivory Coast. Agriculture contributes averagely 17% to GDP. Do you see the tax contribution from agriculture in Ivory Coast? Is 10%. And that is why if you relate tax to GDP ratio, Ivory Coast is slightly higher than what? Ghana, because Ivory Coast adopted a business approach to agriculture. They have commercial plantations and the rest of them. How is this informing government policy going forward? So you see government intervention in the agricultural sector in terms of commercialization. So they are talking about palm oil, right, and the rest of them. So along the palm oil value chain, which Malaysia came to learn from here, in 2023, Malaysia got over $23 billion from palm oil and its related value chain just in 2023. That was actually more than the entire export earnings of Ghana. Okay, so the job creation capacity, the earnings generation capacity from palm oil is very great. So that is how come government is going in there. They are looking at QD in that sector. The other sector that is also not doing well, so somebody spoke about service. So the service we are seeing here, the aspect of the service that should drive the service, that will be job rate, is not doing well. Okay, so the part of the service that is doing well is what we call retail and wholesale. Do you see retail and wholesale? Its contribution to GDP is almost 16%. Look at the tax contribution from there. It's less than 4%. Okay, so it means that the service sector that is driving the economy is not job rich. Okay, because so if you see malls, so many Ghanaians are employed there. A lot of them, their data is not found on GRE websites. Okay, and the rest of them, some of them, they are just on casual and the rest of them. So we need to change the dynamics of the economy. See the sector that a lot of us play in, financial and insurance. Its contribution is not that much to GDP. But look at the tax contribution. 23, right? So in a certain sense, you can say this sector is overtaxed, right? So if the banking and the financial sector were dominated by Ghanaians, we will raise an issue about this. Okay, but because it's foreign dominated, I hope that's okay. The only tangible benefit we can get is the tax revenue, because the dividend, when it's declared, where does it go? Okay, so that is how we have this, and we have seen and we are quiet. Okay, so yes, there are outflows, leakages. The minister spoke about illicit financial flows. Baseline estimation, Ghana loses between $6.1 billion to $8.21 billion annually through illicit financial flows. So they can close this. It will help all of us. Another area that they should tax is high net worth individuals. I don't know whether there are some here, forgive me. So if we do this annually, we'll get around $274 million annually from the taxation of high net worth. We have the data. I don't think some of them are here. Forgive me. Okay, so let's make progress. Okay, so you can see resource allocation. I mentioned government position now. See, CAPEX, it moved from 33 or so billion Ghana cedis to 50 what? 7. We need this in order to stimulate what? Growth and reduce the huge infrastructure deficit. So government has an understanding of where we are, what the shock therapy has caused in terms of the side effect, and they are trying to what? Correct that. But the problem so far is that because anytime revenue underperforms, they don't explain the difference through borrowing. They will rather cut expenditure. So if you see the 2025 budget, even though CAPEX allocation is around 33 billion, budget execution is roughly around 55%. Okay, so it means that we are not spending and allocating resources optimally. So we need to do that to correct that going forward. They are also reducing our gross financing needs and all of that. Then, of course, government special initiatives and the rest of them. This is my view. The cost of implementing government programs is becoming very high. Okay, so, and that is what we need to change. So there are ministries, departments that by law have been established as implementing and originating agencies for policies and the rest of them. So when we come out with a policy, we don't need to create a whole authority for it. So I see that 150 million cedis or so has been allocated to the 24-hour economy. Every aspect of the 24-hour economy, you can situate it within a ministry, a department and agency, and there are people who have been employed to get that done. So my proposal is that democracy should not be seen in terms of cost drive. It should be seen in terms of how do we achieve more with low cost and the rest of them. So I think my time is up. The rest of the slides, when I go home, I'll go and present it to my family. Thank you very much.
Please, can we put our hands once more together for Professor Bob King? He's a professor, but when he's explaining things, you can tell that it's not just the academics of it, right? He's able to connect with his audience. Thank you so much, Prof. All right, we'll take just one more very, very short presentation. We've had a lot of people talking at us, but very soon we'll have an interactive panel discussion so that we can also get to ask questions and contribute as and when we need to. But before we do that, I would quickly like to acknowledge a few more people in our midst. We have in our midst the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, Ghana, Mr. Augustine Addo. Can we put our hands together for him, please? We also have the chairman for Construction Sector or Economic Affairs Committee of the Association of Ghana Industries in the person of Mr. Eric Keyman. Therefore, let's put our hands together for him. Thank you, sir, for coming. As promised, we would hear the Deloitte perspective of the 2026 budget. And to help us do that, we'll be hearing from the partner, the Deloitte Ghana partner, and Deloitte Africa leader for infrastructure and capital projects and economic advisory. Please put your hands together for Mr. Yao Apia Lati.
Thank you very much now. So you go through my presentation. Prof has set a very good thing for us. I'll skip some of my slides because obviously it's captured in Prof's slides. Mine is to just help with the conversation for that we're going to have for our panel discussion. Okay. Okay, good. So we go back a bit. So we do a summary or look at our economy at a glance. So this is what we have, how we performed in the last 9 months of the year. 9 months of the year. So our overall GDP growth, inclusive of oil, that's the first one. The first half of the year, we achieved a GDP growth of 6.3%. And please note that in the year 2025, our GDP target is 4%. So if the first half GDP growth is anything to go by, we are on the path of achieving the 4%. And next year, we are projecting to achieve 4.8%. So the minister's rep said it, that it is not that they are setting moderate targets to achieve or exceed it and clap for themselves, but there's a reason why they've set those targets. Same for the non-oil GDP growth. I think this is a point that we want to emphasize, that historically in the last few years, we've relied significantly on oil, but I think we've relied largely on oil, but we should diversify our economy. So if your non-oil sector GDP growth is also improving, as you can see, it's an impressive growth of 7.8% if you compare to the 6.3% with the oil sector GDP growth. Budget deficit, which is one of the reasons why we went for the IMF or the fund program. Our budget deficit was significantly in excess of the cap that we set for ourselves for 5%. And so we were forced to go for the fund program. Now our budget deficit is in line, so you can see that it's the first 3 quarters of the year is about 1.5. Next year we plan to have a budget deficit of 2.2%, which is less than the 5% under an act that we've passed. That's what we call Fiscal Responsibility Act. Same for inflation. So inflation in September, we achieved a single digit in September, and in October we achieved an inflation rate of 8%. And we had planned to end the year at 11.2%. So we've achieved the target way ahead of ending the year at 11.2%. So we've achieved our single target inflation before the end of the year. So there are a few other statistics down. The very important, interesting one is the exchange rate, the local currency against the dollar in particular. The first 9 months of the year, the local currency appreciated by 3.35% against the major currencies. That's an impressive growth. If we end the year, it will be the first time in so many years that the local currency has appreciated, not depreciated. So previously, we were talking about depreciation. Oh, we are city depreciated lower than yours. No, we shouldn't be benchmarking ourselves against those who are at the bottom. For the first time, you're going to say that the local currency appreciated against the other major trading currencies. We've spoken about industry, agriculture, and the services sector already, so I won't talk about it. This is a summary of the key developments in the first 9 months of the year. First, we've hit a single-digit inflation. We have debt to GDP ratio reducing to about 45%, also below the threshold of the benchmark set by the fund program, which is 55% debt to GDP ratio. Now we are at 45%. There's a cost to it, which is what Prof mentioned, that yes, you can achieve that target of debt to GDP ratio of 45%, but then there's a price to pay if you do that. Disinflation, monetary policy rate, CD appreciation, formalization of the gold sector. Now you have the gold board, which has formalized particularly the informal sector of the gold economy. And now we are getting the benefit of that. And then increased non-oil sector dominance, which I said very important. Very good ratings, that is upgrade of our rating by international rating agencies such as Moody's, Fitch, among others. That demonstrates investor confidence. And we are on the path to exiting the fund program, all things being equal. If we decide to change our mind, we will probably continue, but we're on the path to exiting the IMF program. Now, this is what we call our revenue performance. So we missed our revenue target in the first, or we are likely to miss by the end of the year by about 1.5%. So the miss is coming significantly from the domestic tax revenue and our tax revenue. So the tax portion is where we missed our revenue target, and then social contribution. The other sectors, we were just flat or just on budgets. Same on the expenditure front. So there was underspend in the major expenditure handles, except compensation. So it's only payments of salaries to our public sector workers that we overpaid. Obviously, there were a few strikes, or what we call labor union activities in the health and I think education sector. So once you accede to their request, you end up exceeding your target. But there was underspend across all the major handles: interest payments underspent, grants and subsidies, social benefits, capital expenditure. And that's where the problem is. So like I said, there's always a price to pay.
you underspent on capital expenditure by 36.9%. That's why you have that bad road. So if you underspend in capital expenditure, there's a price you pay that we are not spending. So we are seeking to correct that in the 2026 budget, which I'll show you slightly shortly. So you can see on the revenue side, significant domination of our tax revenue. 83% revenue of our revenue is supposed to come from taxes. We need to diversify that. Our colleagues in Nigeria and others are doing 50% taxation. We are doing 83% taxation. So if tomorrow there's no tax, you only have 17% revenue. So that's a lot of over-concentration on taxation. On the expenditure front, you can see, once again, compensation, that is remuneration of public sector workers, continues to dominate at 30%, and then followed by what you say, grants and subsidies. Grants and subsidies as 21%, interest payment at 19%, and for the first time in so many years, capital expenditure increasing to 19%. Capital expenditure used to be about 11% of our total expenditure. This time it's 19%. And look at the amount that's allocated, 57.58 billion. Out of this 57 billion, 30 billion is going towards the Big Push program. So the road infrastructure and all the projects that we are seeking to spend under the Big Push, this 57 billion for capital expenditure, 30 billion of that is going towards the Big Push program. So you can see, I mentioned before, you have the Big Push. So the Big Push at 30 billion. We have road infrastructure about 4.5 billion. We have about 2 billion for rural electrification, water and sanitation, digitalization, others, making another about 5 billion or so. Now, there are some risks that we have to be mindful of, and especially when you seek to spend on infrastructure, there are a few things that you have to be mindful of. And I think what the question you should be asking yourself, how are we going to fund these activities? If you are going to rely on donor support, there is donor fatigue already. And the donor fatigue is coming from the United States of America, where the president says, hey, all these donors, donor support you are giving to these countries, he started cutting some of them. And it's affected the United Kingdom, it's affected the European Union because they are also cutting expenditure. So if we are seeking to rely on donor for some of these, or a donor community for some of these projects, we must be mindful because there are some risk in them. But there are opportunities. If you're able to implement these projects, they create jobs, they create opportunity for economic growth, they create opportunity for us to rebase our economy and rebase it strongly. If you rebase the economy, what it means is that you valued your capital expenditure in the country. And now you are going to work a new debt to GDP ratio. When you value your assets, the value of your, let's say, your GDP goes up significantly. So you can even borrow more, and so your debt to GDP ratio will still below the threshold of 55%. So that's what we're seeking to do under that. So you see the trend. Our debt to GDP ratio was as high as 80.4% in 2020. Then it dropped slightly to 78.5% in 2021 when we had COVID. And then further slightly to 72.9%. This is when we were forced to sign on to the fund program, because a debt to GDP ratio of more than 50%, it's really something that was worrying. And so when we signed on to the fund program, the trend started moving downwards. And so now last year we ended at 61.8%, which is still above the threshold of 55 set under the fund program. And now we are at 45% of debt to GDP ratio. So I guess we have exceeded target. Deficits. So your deficit means that you are planning to overspend by a certain percentage. So our budget deficit in 2021, which is when we had the COVID, we overspent by 11.5% and then 11.8%. So that's a worrying trend. I mean, like I said, you will be forced to sign on to a fund program because what you are doing here is that you are increasing your borrowing. If your revenue is not enough to pay for your expenditure, then why are you spending that much? So if you spend more than your revenue, it means the rest you have to borrow to pay for it. So when we signed on to the fund program, our deficit started trending downwards. But obviously in 2024, who knows what happens in 2024? And who knows what's going to happen in 2028 again? It's election year. So whenever you have elections, we overspend and we enjoy it. So that vicious cycle has been going on for a long time. So you can see that even though we trended downward at 3.7% in 2023, we overspent in 2024 election year, But then now that has been corrected. So our deficit for 2025 is 1.8, and then we are planning to end 2026 at about 2.2%, which is still below the 5% threshold. So this is our debt to GDP ratio, like I said. The key driver of that is the consolidation of public finances. So as we speak, there are a lot of expenditure that's supposed to, or significant expenditure that's supposed to go through the Ministry of Finance. They kind of vet it and approve for payment to be made. So we are not just spending anyhow. There's some scrutiny in the level of expenditure that we have. Reduce external borrowing. So when we were priced out of, we couldn't access the international capital market, we're not going for external borrowing again. So that actually reduces the risk of exposing yourself to forex debt. And then the last is appreciation of the local currency. When your currency appreciates, you have the benefit because some of your debt are denominated in foreign currency. So if your currency has appreciated, then it means when you convert to the local currency, it becomes lower. So that's one of the benefits that we get. In the year 2022, when the local currency depreciated by 50%, our debt increased by 93 billion on account of the depreciation of the local currency alone, 93 billion. So this year, as we speak, our debt has reduced by over 130 billion just because the local currency appreciated. So when you do well in certain sectors, you get the benefit just by sleeping and waking up one night or one morning and then you are fine. So just correcting some economic indicators. Now look at how the monetary policy the monetary sector of the economy has been doing. So the microeconomic indicators like inflation, interest, and exchange rates. In the year 2022, there was a problem, and I keep referring to the 2022 year. Our end-of-year inflation was higher than our policy rate and also higher than the average T-bill rate. What it meant was that in 2022, your investment was getting negative return. So if you put money in T-bill, the return on the T-bill was lower than the inflation. So then it's better to even spend the money than to keep it. So that was an anomaly that we needed to correct immediately. So we corrected that, and now the red line is below the other two lines, which is the green and the blue. That is the way to go, because what it means is that you have an option to invest your money, and when you invest your money, you are protected against inflation. When you have this anomaly that we had in 2022, it means that when you invest your money, you are not even protected against inflation. The return on your investment is negative. So that has been corrected now. So we are going on a trend where you have a return on investment that is higher than the inflation rate. That protects you against inflation when you have to invest your money. On the tax front, so we speak to some of the tax policies and initiatives that have been proposed. So there's going to be a repeal of the COVID levy. That was supposed to have a sunset clause. When there's no COVID, why are you charging COVID levy? So that is going to be repealed. That's good news. Eliminating the COVID is projected possibly. This is supposed to have a positive impact on businesses and reduce cost of goods and services. And a lot of these policies are also supposed to help mitigate the impact on businesses. So reduction of the effective VAT rate, we had a previous conversation on that. So our effective VAT rate was 21.9%, now it's 20%, just about 1.9 percentage points, which is very low. If you look at our peers in Africa, VAT rate is between 12.5 to 15%, as was mentioned before. So we have to come down a bit more by about 5 percentage points if you want to compete with our peers. Otherwise, what it means is that, look, goods and services in Ghana are more expensive than maybe if you go to Nigeria and other places. Abolishment of the non-deduction of GET Fund and NHIL. So previously, you only calculate, or you were only allowed to claim the VAT component of this composite, this 21.9%. You can only claim the VAT component. The rest of it, you expensed it. Now we have gone back to the point where you can claim the entire 20% that's being proposed. And so business are not going to pass these costs to consumers, increasing the cost of doing business, to say. Increment of VAT registration threshold. One of the basic principles of taxation is what we call flexibility or elasticity. Your tax policy should respond to economic conditions. At the time we set the threshold as $200,000, that was the equivalent of, let's say, $50,000. Today, that $200,000 is only $20,000. So if you don't increase the threshold, what you are saying is that some small and micro businesses are supposed to be registering for tax. These shops you call up-and-perm stores cannot register for tax. You cannot be involving micro business in registration for tax. So now Responding to economic conditions, you have increased the threshold from 200,000 to 750,000. That means you are targeting medium and large-scale businesses who have the competence and ability to manage the administrative cost of VAT. So that's something that is very good. Extension of zero-rated VAT on supply of locally manufactured textiles to 2028. We want to support our textile industry, so that's a very good policy. Abolish VAT on reconnaissance and prospecting of minerals, expected to boost investment in reconnaissance and prospecting of mineral activities. So those of you who understand the mining sector, there are processes. So when you are giving the mining license, you are giving various licenses. So there are licenses that you do for just to do reconnaissance, just to search whether there is any prospect of any mineral resources there at all. Now, some of the people who are giving this license, they just go straight and start mining when they are not supposed to start mining. So there are various licenses you get. One of them is reconnaissance and prospecting. And so there's VAT there that has been abolished. Introduction of VAT on reward scheme, introduction of VAT reward scheme. So comply with it and you get reward. And that's a very good thing because we don't always have to punish people. But when you create an incentive for people to comply with taxes, they will comply. Deployment of fiscal electronic devices. This measure is expected to improve VAT compliance. So some electronic devices to support implementation of digital solution to capture VAT on cross-border digital transactions. So I think this is one of the areas that had a lot of leakages, particularly cross-border transactions. So if you introduce this, we capture some of these things and we avoid or we manage the leakages in the system. So a few tax policies and laws we introduced, operationalize the Independent Tax Appeals Board. So elsewhere in some countries, there are specialized courts that deals with taxes. So this is a very good policy or initiative that's supposed to support us. If you go to the commercial court, by the time you go to the commercial court, there are other cases there, and you probably waste your time, so people do not even want to follow. But if you have an independent tax appeals board, it helps and facilitates tax disputes. Review of key tax legislation, the Income Tax Act, the Customs Act, and then the Excise Act. Some of them have been around from 2015. So in the last 10 years, we've not repealed or amended them to reflect economic conditions, like I said. So we need to repeal some of them. And then close leakages at the ports. I mean, you don't need to be the only stranger in Jerusalem to know that there are some leakages at the ports, and so government is seeking to close them. Infrastructure is the backbone of economic growth. It improves access to basic services like clean water, electricity, and create jobs and boost businesses. So our drive towards supporting infrastructure is a step in the right direction. Thank you very much. So we are going to the very last section of discussion, which is our panel discussion. I have distinguished panelists that I will invite to join me here. So if you know yourself, please start preparing to come up stage. So first on the list, I guess ladies first, is the head of Department of Finance, University of Ghana Business School, and University Teachers Association president. She's also a union leader. So today, there's going to be fire. So head of Finance Department, University of Ghana Business School, and UTAC president, University of Ghana, the person of Professor Vera Fiado. Let's welcome her. Yes. Then the next is the President, Association of Ghana Industries, Dr. Humphrey Eyimdake. See him. He's not here yet. We continue with the next speaker. Okay, so you'll be represented by, okay, so let's welcome. Thank you. We have an entrepreneur and finance and economic policy analyst. He was actually my hall president when I was at the University of Ghana, and he was tough. Comes to the floor and he asks why the floor is smelling. Everybody, get ready, let's clean. And we get to cleaning the floors. So, Mr. Senyor Hosi, let's welcome him. Then, thank you very much. Then we have our tax and regulatory partner. I mean, all the tax policies and laws that you didn't understand, please, when it's time, ask Mr. Wisdom Pano, Esquire. Let's add that. Okay. So here you are not mic'd up. You just get your microphone. So in just 30 seconds to 1 minute, tell us what you do and your first impressions about the budget. Just 30 seconds, maximum 1 minute. So starting from, okay, Wisdom, you have the microphone, so you start.
Good morning to STNNJ. Cherish viewers online. I'm a partner with the tax and regulatory business in Deloitte. I think that my overall impression with the budget, to put it in a couple of points, we saw the 2025 budget, what we've had this year, and I said that budget was pro-household. We saw the removal of the e-levy, betting tax, and a number of taxes that go directly to individuals, whilst the growth and sustainability levy was extended for businesses, and then other taxes for businesses came through. So 2025, there was a pro-household budget and asking more from businesses. But the 2026 budget, I would say, is pro-business. And I think we will go into that. What the VAT reform means for business, we will go into that. But I would say overall, it's really pro-business.
A lot more betting is going to has taken place. Like people are betting more, right? Okay, so Senor.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, it's coming. I can't do 1 minute.
Okay, so you go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to get the politics out of the way because there's been a lot of conversations about we're just following IMF and all that. The Ashantis have a saying about edible teaching and non-edible ban. So for me, if you're doing the right thing, I say it. If you're doing the wrong thing, I'll just say it. I think that theory, that submission is academically incompetent and unfair. When the past government was leaving, they had clear projections for 2025. You find in the indicative budget. What did we see for revenue? 211 for 2025. What did we see as the outturn that we've currently had? We are looking at a projection of 226 billion. And all this revenue has nothing to do with e-levy, all right, which was a major component in that particular past one. You look at the expenditure side and look at all the provisions that have been made in there. Expenditure was projected at 270. What did we see this government do? We've seen them do 251. There's a lot of fiscal prudence. Then you look at the surpluses, the primary balances we're looking at. It was estimated at 1.5. Okay, at 1.5, we've seen them do what, 1.8. You should give credit where credit is due. And you look at 2024 and the government's own performance of the time. Respectfully, almost shambolic, if you want to talk about things relative to the fiscal discipline we're looking at. We still had what? A big negative deficit. Even though it was planning a primary surplus of what? 0.5. We had negative 3.2 or 3.6 thereabout. Please, the people at the Ministry of Finance today have done a great job and they deserve a round of applause. Said that, we have seen people do before, and tomorrow morning we wake up and then we're in total chaos. So the real question is in whether we can actually sustain this or not, and that's why we must all remain vigilant. I'm a multi-sector entrepreneur and also a policy and social activist, as you already know. Maybe you know that part more. I'm invested in finance, I'm invested in agriculture, I'm invested in technology. I'm also invested in manufacturing. So practically every sector of the economy, I have a feel of what happens somewhat. I think we should admit where we are coming from, and we should appreciate the progress that has been deliberately made. Now to the budget that we see for 2026. First, we discuss it at the top level and discuss it. And I do agree that it's a great budget, but it's not a transformational budget. One, there's a lot of brilliance you should see in that budget, especially when you look at the plan on the capital expenditure, which is supposed to really drive growth. I think it's fantastic. You look at what we are doing with our windfall from our minerals royalties, and they've just moved that whole windfall down there. They cut out the waste that we were planning to do with Ejapa. Do you remember Ejapa? Have we forgotten so quick? All right, we're going to really mortgage our whole mineral royalties, all right, just for a pittance. That pittance we are practically getting today. In a year, over $500 million, isn't it? How much are we really making now? Over 9 billion cedis, which is about $900 million in royalties. Look, guys, we are making progress, and there are people who are being responsible at this time. It's not to say that these people cannot be irresponsible. They can very much be irresponsible, but we must keep that vigilance active. If we didn't fight Ijapa, we'll be losing $900 million a year today. Now, this portion has come to feed a good part of this big push, which is supposed to unlock a lot of infrastructure. The question is whether the infrastructure is going to stimulate the kind of sustainable growth or not. Now, every single budget I've read in the last 5 years keeps talking about job creation. And you heard Akes also saying the same thing. But the question, how do you keep talking about job creation, and your budget, you don't even give any data on unemployment? What is the real unemployment data here? Are we really measuring it? We are not. So it tells us that politicians pay lip service to this talk of job creation. Meanwhile, it is practically one of the most important national security issues we have. We saw what happened at Elwak, right? It's not regular, guys. It's not regular. It's because unemployment is deep. You take the data we have today. The data is telling us that we have about 14% unemployment. We're also having a bit of underemployment of 6.8 or so percent. Forget that data. Underemployment is way higher than that. We all know. The IMF, when we did a census, said it was around the World Bank. When we did a census, said unemployment within the youth was about 50%. And then we had booked 20% or 19.6 or so percent for youth unemployment. We have a real problem. So if you come here, you should set us clear unemployment targets. We haven't seen this budget speak to unemployment very clearly as far as output is concerned. They said they'll create jobs, a certain number of jobs. How is unemployment going to reduce? Nobody's talking about it. Then you take the Gini index that was mentioned. I hope we know what the Gini index is. The Gini index is practically measuring inequality. When you have one, then it means that you have a highly unequal. You have inequality at the peak. If you have zero, you are perfectly balanced as far as equality is concerned. We are now at 0.44. Go and check the data. We have barely changed in the past 10 years. And you take poverty, we have barely changed. We are still standing at 25.9. It used to be about 23%. It means we are getting worse. You take the SOFI data, which is the state of food nutrition, food security and nutrition. It used to be food insecurity, so we call it SOFI. SOFI 2025 is up. I only saw 2024. 15 million of our people are food insecure, up from 11 million in 2016. We have 3.5 million of our people who are highly food insecure. They can't afford a meal. They are not rationing it. Then you come to our Greek policy. I don't see that strength or strategic or transformational tool in shaping that entire part of our sector. We talked about GLAT. There's no GLAT.
We will come to the question. My brother. You address the question. Thank you very much. So let's go. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning. And thanks to Deloitte for organizing this program. I'll be quite brief. I'm sure the conversations will go on. From the industry's perspective, I would say that the budget looks promising. However, there are pitfalls that we should be guarded by. We've gotten to this level by interventionist policies at the monetary side and at the fiscal side. And we can't sustain that. At a point, the economy is going to contract and there will be pushback. So I'm happy to realize that the managers of the economy have identified that and have decided that in the 2026 budget, there'll be more spending towards growth. Now, industry has been struggling. I mean, manufacturing has gone down, and we haven't seen specific policies to boost manufacturing and create jobs. Figures are in there for industry, it's hopeful, but we need to see deliberate policies. There are a lot of production factors that work against the growth of industry. Access to capital and its cost is not favorable. The cost of power is not favorable. Taxation is not favorable. And then we have all the other dynamics within the West African sub-region, where our involvement in the ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme allows imports to come in virtually zero tariffs. So you find that the VAT rates, even in those neighboring countries, are lower than ours. So even if you use certain basic fundamentals, you see that we are disadvantaged. So we need deliberate policies to be introduced to actually support industry. I have some suggestions to make, but I think as we go forward, they will come up. But we are hopeful that if we are able to generate the revenue that we project and we spend them in the right places, the economy will grow and will create jobs.
Very much. So, Prof, you end it all.
Yeah, so in terms of my overview, I think it's pivoting from a place where we had crisis before, we are stabilizing, and with that, we are looking to rope everybody in terms of the business sectors, of course, trying to rope in the SME sector, which is the backbone of the economy, by the threshold for the VAT elements. Whilst it tries to be inclusive, so I'll pick my brief concerns from the GESI perspective, that's the gender equity and the social inclusion perspective. Whilst it makes a case to want to address the persons with disability, the gender, the women, the girls, the small, everyone, you find that it lacks clear parameters as to what exactly are our targets. So when you look at the budget and you want to look at who is benefiting, who has been left out, and how do we know? In some places you see, yes, we have something for Women's Development Bank. The amount we are putting in there, what exactly do we want it to achieve? And are there clear targets that we would want to work with? For me, those ones are a bit hazy, and if we don't handle those ones, yes, it will be that we have a good piece on paper, but some of the things will need to be fleshed out if we're going to make it work for us. So in general, that's my overview of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Prof, I'll continue with you. So you see the macroeconomic result for 2025 shows some impressive results. So inflation has dropped from 23.8% to now 8% in October. CD appreciating by 35%. Debt to GDP ratio now at 45%, dropping from about 62%. From the macroeconomic perspective, can you say the fundamentals are now strong and set us on a path to reset for growth and transformation? Yeah.
So I would say that the numbers are very encouraging, that's for sure. But I will be hesitant in saying that it provides a guarantee. We haven't reached there yet. So we are in the early days where we can say that, yes, for transformational growth, we need a bit more. And that really shows that whilst what we have tried so far is working in terms of the tighter fiscal stance we've taken and also the restructuring that has gone on, in reality, if we're going to lock that in and make that work for our growth, the transformational growth that we are looking for, then it means that we need to provide that lock-in that also provides some kind of credibility and to give people assurance that they can put their money in the system. For now, we have made some good progress, but we will need to work at it more. Now, the honest answer I'll give is that yes, the fundamentals are now stronger, but in and of themselves, they haven't become that self-sustaining to drive it. So we need to do a bit more. As the years go out, we need to work on our surpluses. We need to ensure that we are staying within the remit of the relevant frameworks we've set for ourselves, because only within that are we going to see the growth that we need. And if we don't do that, then whatever gains we've made so far, we are likely to lose in that process. So I think that's what I've got to say about that. Thank you.
Last year, I remember I was in the same panel with Mr. Akwabwa, and he mentioned that, look, they are happy with some of the tax handles that have been removed, etc. But government has not been clear on the VAT, because VAT, they kind of ring fence it and say it will come later. Now, some of the tax reform that you see in this budget, are you happy with them? What were you expecting to see? And the ones that have been repealed, the ones that they are proposing to remove, etc., does it give you some comfort as industry? Are you happy now? Yeah.
I wouldn't say we are happy, but I would say that it's a step in the right direction. The cascading effect of the VAT in the past regime and the restructuring that has happened would reduce cost in our pricing. So it's a positive thing, and it will inure to the benefit of the consumer. We need to be looking at our economy holistically. And for example, fast-moving commercial goods that you find on our shelves, 70% is imported. We are only working around producing 30%, and not even in value, but just the volumes. And that doesn't make us really control the productive sector of the economy. We need to change that dynamic so that we can be doing 70% local and importing. But like I said in my opening remarks, there are factors that are working against us being able to scale up. So we saw this 24-hour economy policy as an opportunity to just step into industry and then let us scale up. We have the plants and the factories already there, but some are even operating with outmoded equipment, consuming high volumes of energy, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at the cost of capital, I mean, at a point in time, we're doing about 35%. So if you borrowed to buy capital equipment, pay duties at the ports, et cetera, within 3 years, you have more than doubled your debt, because the amount of money you borrowed to bring in that equipment and the interest that is accumulating. And for capital equipment, you all know the amortization takes a longer period, maybe 5 years plus. So we need cheaper credit to be able to retool. Now we are moving from brown technology to green technologies. How do we fund that? There's nothing being, we talk about it generally, but there's no specific action for industry to say that if you want to retool and use more green technology and equipment, then you can have access to some cheap funds to be able to do that. Those are all factors that are working against us taking up with production. Now, when you come to the indices that we have arrived at, I'll say that they are good, but they are not sustainable using the models that we are with, the economic models that we are using. You see, if production takes up and we are creating jobs and paying good incomes to our employees, you realize that you don't need to intervene in the market either through monetary policy actions or fiscal tightening. The indices themselves will find their own levels. But once you use monetary policy to tame inflation by contracting cash into the
money that is being thrown into the market, on a platform, they said you are not just putting money in the market, they are doing financial intermediation. So that financial intermediation, yeah.
Spending to be able to bring down inflation and other indices that we are happy about. Are we going to continue to tighten? There's going to be pushback. So I tell the economists that this year has been the honeymoon period for the government. We are not going to continue with this next year. So there must be deliberate policy. One suggestion that I'd like to make is that there are certain infrastructure projects that are commercial infrastructure. The government should not be funding that entirely. Whatever resources are available to them, they must leverage those resources to partner with the private sector to implement those commercial projects. we will double the output, or triple or quadruple the output. Most of the infrastructure projects that the private sector is not venturing into is because when you do the modeling, there are viability gaps. You find it difficult to recover your money with the kind of revenues you generate. So it is those kinds of projects that the government must come in to close those viability gaps. I don't see why we are talking about agriculture and all the value chain aspects of agriculture, and then government is buying tractors, is buying fertilizer, is building warehouses, and so on and so forth. It has taken over the whole commercial aspect of the agriculture. If for anything at all, access to land, that's...
Which is something that government can do easily. Yes, okay. Mm-hmm.
So if you're able to provide 30,000 square meters, you will occupy maybe 9 months.
Yeah.
We'll use that.
Okay. Mm. Yeah. Mm.
But because these challenges exist, they're using the money to do.
Yeah, they are buying government securities. So we have about 80 billion of pension funds. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
So
Okay.
when we talk of
Yeah.
changing the structure of the economy, we should be moving away from consumption only
Mm-hmm.
and doing production.
Excellent.
Once we do the production right, all the indices don't require edits by the central bank.
Great. Good. Thank you very much. So next to the industry person, so Mr. Senior Hosi, I know when it comes to the agri sector, you understand the parameters. So we have the new national oil palm policy, which was articulated very well by the minister. They are aiming for about 100,000 new hectares, backed by about 500 million financing window for a 5-year moratorium. As someone with a background in agri, how do you assess government plans to invest in the oil palm sector in the first place, which value chain has a lot of bottlenecks and all the challenges that you know? I know that President Kufuor started the cassava starch initiative. He had the oil palm initiative. We had some alliance with Malaysia and others. Today, we are going back to some of these initiatives. How feasible are these?
I think the biggest problem this government has is socialism. And it has to be careful. Our economy is not structured for that level of sustenance. If you look at the SOE productivity, it's extremely terrible. You know, so this orientation of government must own, government must control, it's not wise. But government should have access and have the benefits of the state. The government should be able to take over any particular. We should have that productivity available. So you talk about all kinds of things that they say they're going to set up. I think that government should be quite circumspect. We've seen it a number of times.
10 minutes, you have to open the floor for like 40 minutes.
No problem.
Finance minister called it red gold. I agree. And he made
A particular reference where he said that, can we believe, or he said we import $200 million worth of crude palm or something of that sort. Mr. Minister, we import more than $200 million of rice that we can also grow and actually eat. Have we solved that? We haven't. Having said that, we shouldn't solve it. That's my big problem with the big push. The big push is a fantastic project, but I think that the big push should not be just a push on roads and bridges, but it should unlock sustainable sectors. Take agriculture. Agriculture, according to the Ministry of Agri, and in fact the President himself, when we launched the Feed Ghana, the FGP, Feed Ghana program, says it accounts for 38.3% of our labor. But 38.3% of your labor is accounting for 21% of your GDP. Is that productive? That's why I say the budget is not transformational. It has impact. I can see that through the infrastructure spend it wants to drive. But is it really changing the matrix of our...
No, we are doing 24-hour economy. Is that not so?
We should, the jargon business, we should stop. For example, I was telling you guys about the Sophie report, our set of insecurity, how worse it has gotten. All right, 11 million people were insecure, food insecure in 2016, and now 2025 we have, at the end of 2024 we have 15 million, almost what, a 40% increase. Has our population increased by 40%? It means that our situation is getting worse. But in between that, we've had FASDEP 1, FASDEP 2, PFJ 1, PFJ 2, and what. Please, GCAP, gossip. The jargons must stop. So I don't want to hear 24-hour economy. No. You see, government can trigger that in particular areas. But look at the whole Gusitano 24-hour economy project. Fantastic thinking, but it's not 24-hour economy. It's a major what they call economic development plan, which is okay. Call it what it is. But what is 24-hour economy about that? But the 24-hour economy about our ports running 24 hours. The 24-hour economy about our courts begin to run 24 hours. So those things that we have bottlenecks. 24-hour economy, let's get it straight. It's not a policy intervention. It's a policy outcome of effective and sustained economic policies. Nobody needs to tell me, as a rice producer, to run 3 shifts if the demand and the supply of raw material is there. Are you the one going to tell me? And the company is already running. So what levers within the economy are you going to unlock? What new value chains are you going to create to be able to make it natural for people to run a 24-hour operation? You can't say you reduce my electricity and that is why I want 24 hours when I can't even get paddy. And we are not discussing these things. So I talk about back to our Greek. Practically all the conversations you have in the budget, and it has been the life of all our politicians. And we must start calling them out to stop. They discuss these things as far as input is concerned. They don't discuss the productive output. Did we hear the finance minister, this current one, the previous one, the one before him, ever tell you the level of maize production we are going to have? Did they tell the level of rice production they are going to have? Because there's no plan. All they talk about is how much fertilizer they are going to invest, how many seeds they are going to do. That's what we talk about. None of that works. We don't eat coconut. Without coconut, we'll survive, but we need coconut for other things. It's fine. Our basic staples are not working, and people are getting hungrier in our country. People are getting unemployed every day. How are we making that sector productive? How are we unlocking agriculture to be able to sustain manufacturing that can create higher value jobs and not have 38% of our economy, of our workforce, just being productive at 21%? How do we reduce that and make people move from agriculture and rather do more of manufacturing and high-level services, but still increasing our agrarian output because fewer people are getting more productive? So people can actually buy food and self-sustain. Over 60% of our people cannot afford a balanced diet. These are the realities we are not discussing in our budget. And that's why I have a problem. The big put's fantastic, 30 billion. Why didn't you put 2 billion more to unlock agriculture and rather reduce that road infrastructure a bit by that? It's fantastic. I don't stop the big push.
Yes.
Big push should not just be on one side, but agric is that one thing that can be won within a single electoral cycle. Agric. Because we have 2 seasons. Within 1 year, you have 8 seasons. If you are more efficient at it, you can make it 12 seasons. People can feel the impact with the quality of food they have. Manufacturing can benefit from it. I ran a mill. Let me just end it this way. It's investing in a 10-ton mill. It made no sense anymore. Because in my 5-ton mill could not actually work. We just work for maybe 2 or 3 months a whole year. What is 24-hour economy about that? We should be discussing how we can unlock paddy. Today, the problem you have, let's get it clear, has nothing to do with glut. The minister in the budget talked about we will feed our children with what we grow. Fantastic. That's a statement. They should have told us how much productivity we are getting out of it, how much we're going to get as far as the rice consumption from government-driven demand. When I asked the Minister of Agric on Newsfire the last time, he didn't know. He says we should go and ask Minister of Education. Meanwhile, you're Minister of Agric. You should be able to have a view on demand and you should be able to plan supply to match it. But we don't have it. So this conversation where we keep talking about input must stop. They should come and give us clear targets that we are moving food production from X to Y in real terms. Then we know how it's going to impact food security.
Thank you very much. So, Senor, I'll come back to you on the gold board, the gold policy, but wisdom. I mentioned some of the tax policies. So, the removal of COVID levy, the reforms in the VAT sector and all. Just talk us through some of these major tax policies. What do they mean? I was on a platform and I mentioned decoupling. The guy said, what's decoupling? What does it mean to the average business person sitting here? So all these policies that I mentioned, how does it impact businesses?
Yeah, we've bundled the conversation around VAT front and back, but let me just disaggregate what is happening. I can't count the number of times we've talked about COVID levy, and even on this platform, for the last 2 or 3 times we've sat here, COVID levy was a big one for industry. So what has happened in 3 buckets? So COVID levy, the minister has proposed and announced that COVID levy would no longer apply. That is 1%. Then we have 2 levies, the National Health Insurance Levy and then the Get Fund Levy, together being 5%. What we used to do, or what we are doing today, is that you put those levies on your price, their taxable value. So if you are selling a good for 1,000 cedis, you put 5% plus 1%, 6% on 1,000, and then you charge VAT of 15% on the 1,000 plus the levies. Now, those levies, the finance minister has announced that those levies will now be deductible. Before, they were not deductible. As a businessman, you pay 5% plus 1% COVID levy, 6% on every 100,000. That is 6,000 Ghana cedis. You pay that and you cannot recover it from the VAT you charge to the one buying your products. From 2026, if the amendments or we have a new VAT Act, you would be able to fully deduct the levies from what you pay. So it is a big one. 6,000 on every 100,000 Ghana cedis cost being saved from 2026. That is a big one for businesses. Then to top that, the minister announces that the total VAT would be 20%. Now, I've heard businesses and analysts talk about the fact that that could be much lower. But I say, being close to the numbers, that even coming from 21.9% to 20% is quite a steep from a macro level. And we would have to guard our revenue. Once we go into 20% with levies that you can deduct, as a country, we would need to guard the compliance. We would need to bring in, as the minister has announced, the digital platforms and all the compliance tools that will ensure that we are collecting the 20%. About 3 years ago, when the GRA did an exercise by keeping an officer in various shops in Abusokai, in shops in Kumasi, etc., we saw significant jump in VAT collected from the same shops. Because as a country, we have a bad attitude when it comes to paying taxes. You can talk about overtax, the PAYE, etc., but on an aggregate level, we have several shops that are still asking you, would you want a VAT invoice or you want an invoice?
And then we have that they get away with it.
So I would say that for businesses, this is a big saving, and the fact that you can deduct levies would actually unlock value. And I'm looking forward to the business community responding to that. I've sat in an advisory capacity where these levies has killed deals because VAT and business is all about value addition. People can come to this shop, they buy an item, and then they go to the next block and they sell it to you. And that happens in Makola, etc. The people that sit in front of the shops, they just buy from the shop and resell to you with a margin. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's business and they need to add value. But what the levies has done over the years has been that it does not support that kind of value addition and even more. Because once you try to buy and resell, you have cascading, the so-called cascading effect.
Impact, yes.
Hopefully, taking that away would drive more business activity and drive the
Great. So, Wisdom, lastly for you, there's something that a lot of people have observed. I mean, in the last few years, post-COVID, there's a lot of online activities, online trading, online platform. There are people who are doing online business as a side hustle. Nobody is finding them for tax purposes. I mean, GRA intends to implement some digital agenda. How feasible are these? I mean, in my bedroom, I've been doing my online business. How are you able to catch me?
Absolutely feasible, and we will not be reinventing the wheel. Countries have implemented these means of collecting taxes. If you are paying for any service out of your room, you are using platforms, and each of those platforms can be monitored. In fact, we are already having VAT on a lot of the online services that you pay for. Now, what the GRA would be doing, or what they've proposed to do, is to ensure that there are linkages between the providers that you use to pay for those services and the GRA platform, so that once you are paying for those services, we can have a direct monitoring and as well as collection of the taxes. We are using Momo, and that was the argument around e-levy. We shouldn't, and in my view, we should never have done e-levy, but we should have used that platform to tax the real transactions that happen. So I believe we have the technologies to do that. It comes with a will. Once we are implementing these platforms, we are implementing these measures, and together as a country, we don't go shouting that, why should I pay tax on betting? And mind you, the winnings from betting has never been exempt. So there was really nothing wrong taxing that income. If they don't pay it now, when would they pay it? So we should not bring policies that continue to encourage the informal sector from paying taxes. Then we turn around and say that the informal sector never pays taxes. During the COVID, my last point, during COVID, we gave a lot of exemptions, including the tax stamps from shops. How much do they pay? 25 cedis for a chop bar. How much is the bowl of fufu today? 25 cedis, that woman can still pay. And I am of the view that once we gave them that moratorium, do not pay tax of 25 cedis during COVID, they never wanted to go back. And I'm sure a lot of them are never back to contributing that 25 cedi to the national kitty. And then it's the people in formal sector that continue to pay tax, which is not sustainable. So when we talk about productive sector, sustainable measures, I think that from a tax point of view, sustainable measures would be broadening the tax nets, and I say that mending the tax nets, mending it so that the leakages do not.
Leakage, yes. We are broadening it wide enough. Just plug the leakages. So, Senor, I'm coming back to you with a question on Gold Board. So the Gold Board initiative has been a major success based on the numbers that we have, at least. With small-scale gold exports, about 81.7 tons, surpassing large-scale. The next step is to implement the traceability system. Where are we getting this gold from? And how do we find out whether they are not coming from illegal mining sources? Now, how feasible is this traceability procedure? And is government even going to implement it, given the stand on Galamsey? So, Senor, traceability system, can we enforce it? And will it work?
The Gold Board policy, I think, is possibly the most significant economic policy that has been taken in the last 10 years. We've definitely seen the impact as far as centralizing our flows and actually fully accounting for it and cutting out the leakages. So that's not a problem. The mining must happen. It's just that it has to happen responsibly. Tracking and tracing helps deal with it, because practically you have to map out everybody from a mine, match it to every single transaction that happens between a miner and a trader, and then eventually to an aggregator, whether self-finance or the central aggregator, then to the gold board. The track and trace system, as I understand it, I've had the privilege to engage them, and we are working at technologies to support them. The key risk is how effectively you monitor a given mine. Now, the mine is registered, is plotted on the MCAS system, so it's geolocated. Transactions can be geolocated. Purchases can be absolutely recorded. And from a scan, you should be able to see which exact mine this particular piece of gold bar came from. So that is possible. Would that necessarily eliminate irresponsible mining? Not necessarily. There's always going to be a risk, because the mining activity, whilst you are digging, is not a traceable thing. It's only the output that is traced. So you still need to have multiple approaches. The only thing here is that with this kind of traceable structure, the gold board will be in a position to influence and enforce significant responsible sourcing. Because I can find you as a mine. I know where you are. I've licensed you. So every output I record. The question is, the output you are bringing, have you smuggled in product from an illegal activity and added it into your reported thing? Over time, through auditing, you may be able to validate that, but you would have created the data chain and process to get that achieved.
Feasible.
It's feasible, and I think we should really support it.
Great. So I'll open the platform for questioning, but maybe closing one for Prof. And Nina. So please, do you have any question? If you have anybody asking, so whilst you're preparing for question, Prof, I'll come to you, Prof. Fiado. So given the 2026 budget, in many respects, is expected to set the tone for notable transformation in the economy. Not much has been projected in the sectorial sector like that. You have, even with major transformational policies like 24-hour economy at the center, agri industry and service sector are expected to continue to dominate. So as a financial analyst, what do you make of the seemingly misalignment? So you can see some misalignment. We want transformation, yet we are not really focused on. So please get your questions ready. After Prof is done with her submission, I'll leave the floor for you to ask questions. Yeah, go ahead, Prof.
Well, you're right to sense a bit of tension and say that you perceive a misalignment, but I'd like to look at it a bit differently. Over the past years, it's clear what our sectoral structures have always looked like. But then if you look at agri, for example, we are getting 21% in terms of the output, but we are taking almost 40% of labor, and then the others. So the bigger question then really is, should it be about just the structural changes, or rather we should work towards the productivity inherent? Because you go into other jurisdictions, you find very few people in there, but they produce a lot. So the bigger question really is, what's the level of productivity within our sectors? Are we pushing for, let's say, diversification? We keep on talking about export, value addition. All of those things are missing. So if I look at it from that angle, I'm thinking that it's more of a case of maybe not an inherently flawed strategy, but rather working from a conservative point where this is what we have. This is what we know. This is what we will start from. So try and fix the missing gaps in there. And then from there, you can build on. Because if you're going to just move from one to another, and when it comes to this structure, it's not about a particular size that may be. It's about what you have and how you can make the most of it. So I think a starting point will be to try to make the most of what we currently have, which has been consistent for so many years. And then from that, we can build on and then transform. So then the 24-hour economy, from what I get, it's more of long term. So it's not something we're just going to start shifting things around, but rather start from what we have, improve the productivity, make sure that we are mostly export-oriented, we are creating jobs within the sector, we are doing a lot of the value addition, which has being that in fact, we talked about this value addition for so many years, but we are not doing much within that space.
No comment. Great. Thank you very much. So
If we can fix that, I think so. We shouldn't be too fixated on it should be 30% by the end. But the question is, even if we have 5% of the populace working in there, they can produce 35%. Then we are getting value for like that push. But for now, I think we may be a bit cautious and just pushing some
I mean, that's a point. Recently, I heard someone say that if Africa, we are not adding value to our raw materials, what we are doing is that we are exporting prosperity and jobs to other countries, and we are importing the poverty here. So, a very good point. So, you have a closing remark, so you can say something. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So, yeah.
So the targeting was that we have industries who are working maybe 30-40% scale. So what do we do to help them scale up 100%? Sometimes in manufacturing, we forget that excess capacity in itself is a cost. Yes, it's a huge cost. So once we scale up and we are maximizing our capacity, costs will also come down. Now, we've now ended up metamorphosing the 24-hour economy into a whole national development project. In Volta Economic Corridor, 2 million hectares of land to be irrigated, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. Even the blueprint may take another year or two to develop. So the low-hanging fruits are that look at our existing industries. We had the previous government coming up with one district, one factory. We've abandoned it. Some of our industrialists have money locked up because they were trying to retool. They were required to pay a certain deposit. Contracts were signed with manufacturers. That component of the cost was transferred. Government was supposed to pay for the rest. The money never came. Now these industrialists are being required to pay interest on the first tranche of money that has gone out. And a lot of them are planning to go legal and try and retrieve their monies because it was government that breached the agreement. The industries are there. Why don't we look at them? Why do we have to create anew? I'm looking at some of the data that Mr. Pialate put up on the infrastructure thing. And out of the 30 or so billion that was there, only 4.45 billion was allocated to roads. In this year's expenditure on infrastructure, even the big push we are talking about, most of it went to pay arrears. Nothing new has happened. In fact, most of the projects that have been listed are now in the procurement phase. So really, we didn't create any jobs with big push this year.
Okay, great. So maybe any
that next year it's not. Sorry.
So just briefly, yes, go ahead.
Hello, yeah. Reason why the 1D, 1Fs and all that fail is because we have not thought through the value chain. Let me go back to rice. I beg you. The glut you are having, I repeat, it's not a glut. It's because the economics don't make sense. The production of rice, all right, milled, and this is not top grade, all mixed, it's around 460 cedis or 470 cedis per 50 kg bag. You have not added VAT. This is one of the conversations I wish Akes was here. When we mill rice, we have to charge VAT. You tell me how that actually works. Guess how much the equivalent of that rice is selling, imported? 290 Ghana cedis. So if the miller cannot make money, how would he go and buy the paddy at 5 cedis, which costs the farmer 5 cedis to produce?
Okay.
The economics don't make sense. Now, if you are somebody who's producing at 40%, the question you should answer first is, how can I drive his demand to 100%, not his production capacity, but his demand? This is the problem I was talking about, though. We keep talking about input. Nobody is planning on the actual output. So where is that demand for it? How are you going to drive demand for him? In fact, when you de-risk the supply chain by driving demand for him, banks and capital will flow and fund him
They will follow him
from 100% to 200%. Oh, sorry, you said I'll go
Thank
off.
you. So, with the honor seminar, before I come to the platform, I'll read some online comments. So, some of them are for you, Wisdom, and they are on taxes. So, what's the estimated impact on revenue after the repeal of the COVID-19 levy? Why is the tax revenue so low? It is because government has not consolidated data on the agriculture sector. Most high net worth individuals are usually investors of the economy. Taxing them at a higher rate, wouldn't it discourage them? So maybe some comments, I'll come back to you if you have any comments on it. So someone is asking the impact of the COVID levy, the repeal of the COVID levy, and then our proposal to tax higher net worth individuals. Is that not going to be counterproductive? And then someone also has a comment, I guess it will be for government. What data informed government's policy on Nkwonketinketi? Does the government have data on the number of poultry farms in Ghana and the output from these farms? What are the key challenges in the sector? We must answer all these questions so beautifully before we start even a new policy on Nkwonketinketi. I know Senor will have 1,000 comments on this. Yes. So any questions on the platform? Then it comes. Yes, I'm Sado. Yeah.
My name is Augustinado from ICA Ghana. This question I wanted to ask Mr. Akest, but I couldn't get him because of time. But I believe my honorable panelists can answer that. We know that economic theory says that the velocity of circulation of money in an economy has positive correlation with the rate of economic growth. In the past year, that's year 2025, in the current year, most of us are aware that there was a slack in government spending, and this resulted into stability in terms of pricing. However, it has effect on growth of economic activities in the country. And do we say that, and I heard Mr. Wonkrokon say that the government did very well in 2025, no doubt about that. Do we say that not spending money in the economy, where people are paid salary, but they have nothing to work with, just about 6 billion cedis was spent on goods and services in the year, resulting into people working, taking salary but not working? Was that a good policy? Now, Professor Wolfing did say that we are going to 2026. Government wants to reverse that by spending 50 billion cedis on it. Current year 2025, cash releases as against budget provisions was about 56%. What guarantee or assurance do we have from the government that the 50 billion cedis earmarked for capital projects will actually be spent? These are things that we should watch. And therefore, if we have any advice to the government, we should go back to the government and tell the government that there is a need to improve productivity until we expand the production possibility frontier of the economy by deliberate policies to influence production. All these types of things that we are doing are cosmetics, and they will not take us anywhere. So let us, whatever we have, tell government that there is a need to spend on productive capacity and stop this type of cosmetics policies that we are doing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your comment. Do you have any other person? Okay, good. Start.
I just wanted to come to my brother AGI in his submission. He raised in regards to government policies not deliberately to grow the private sector, the industry. He made mention of even the silos or warehouses built and other things. But I must say, I think AGI is a very respected institution. I guess when they were doing budget hearing, probably you have met with the Minister of Finance and you have presented your position, what you were expecting. Did you meet the expectations? What was the expectations in the budget? Where your submission captured in the budget or not. Because I strongly believe that we were met, okay, and we submitted. And we strongly, and it's not just for 2025, but 2026 budget alone. I remember 2022, 2023, or 2023, 2024, we were all on top of government, that the previous government, that if COVID is gone, you need to abolish COVID. It was a clerical call. And the same thing applies to e-levy, because you pay, most of the time if you are clearing, you can pay duty wherever you are using your wallet. We call. And so if today they've given us, and indeed, we've been talking about the decoupling cost on this Get Fund health insurance was a huge cost. And we said when we went accumulatively, the VAT used to be 21.9. And the ban brought it back to 20%. I think as we should say that we should appreciate the Minister of Finance and say, as Oliver Twist always ask for more. But if we speak this way, and we are industrious, and we know that we also have the opportunity to meet with the Finance Minister, or for that matter, and we come and we don't appreciate, we need to appreciate, show appreciation, then we ask for more. And I think that is what I just want to clarify.
You were consulted. It's not like you were informed.
Equally AGI, I think they cannot do budget without AGI consultation. Thank you very much.
So you were consulted, not informed. You were engaged. I like that. Go ahead. Okay. So you can use the other. Okay, so turn on them.
Okay, let me use Senyo's. My brother, the process is not as you see it. The process we have is that when government is preparing for a budget, it asks us to make inputs. The AGI has 23 sectors. So we capture sectorial challenges, put them together. Some of the challenges are cross-cutting, some are industry-specific. Then we put together a paper and present it to government, because government doesn't inform us of its policy ahead. They just ask us to bring inputs. We are preparing budget, so what do you want to be considered? When we give it to them, whether they take it or not is another matter. But we've been advocating that at the policy formulation stage, they need to engage us. And we have empirical evidence that when they do that, it works. And I'll give you an example. In the textiles industry, it was virtually collapsed a few years ago. And we looked at the cost structure and we said, look, if you can back end the taxes, it creates an opportunity for us to produce cheaply and export. Because we don't have the kind of, plants across the sub-region. Ghana is one country that is blessed with textile industries, because we had a cotton agricultural cotton production some years back. There are just two main items in the textile industry, the gray baft and then the inks that they use to print, and these are imported. So remove the taxes up front and back end. There's a cascading effect of the taxes as you build up, even with all this COVID and others. It just sent the cost up. We fought it. The government listened and then allowed the structure or the model we proposed to go on. The result was that textile production was revived, exports increased, workers that had been laid off were re-engaged, government earned money from payroll taxes, profits from everything, CIT. And at the end of the day, we proved to government that it was making more money from back-ending than front-loading.
Okay. So that's a very good example.
They have extended that window in this budget to 2028.
Okay. We saw that, yes. Thank you very much. So, Wisdom, a few comments for you as well. So, the ordinary Ghanaian, why does import duties seem so high in Ghana? How much of a factor is tax avoidance and evasion by foreign multinational corporations? They are doing a lot of tax evasion, someone says here. And what has been the obstacle in collecting property taxes So we have been talking about property taxes for a long time, but what has been the obstacle? Why are we not collecting? So maybe, sir, you can ask your question while Wisdom, you think through your answers. Yeah.
In Nkrumah's time, there has been a lamentation by every finance minister that Ghana's economy is informal sector. So we don't want to tax the informal sector. We did a study last 2 years, and we realized that about 90% of construction building houses are done by people in the informal sector. The electricians, the plumbers, the carpenters, we pay them, and yet they don't pay taxes. Some of them may be earning more than those of us who wear flying tie and sit in an air-conditioned office. I don't know what has been the challenge that our Ministry of Finance and GRA has not been thinking about it. I wish the Ministry of Finance official was here. If they could give University of Ghana Business School 1 million Ghana cedis, I'm sure they'll be able to come up with a proper way of taxing the informal sector. The literature abounds in other countries where they have been able to tax people in the construction sector. That is number one. Number two, tourism and hospitality can drive Ghana's growth. You go to Dubai, Kenya, and Gambia here. People come to Ghana and they want to stay for just 3 or 4 days because there's a VAT on our hotel rooms. If we are able to bring VAT rate to, let's say, 10% for the hospitality sector, it can stimulate
another
demand.
back-end conversation, like, yes.
Unfortunately, I don't know what goes into our fiscal policy. Sometimes they need academicians and research institutions to be able to bring research fundings. Unfortunately, government does not even fund researchers in this country at all. Almost every research that we do in Ghana is funded by donors. This year, USAID put their oxygen funding from everywhere. And so there's not enough money doing research. And if a country is not doing research, it means that the country is not having a future, because China, India, and Asians and Europeans are spending billions of dollars every year so that they can win in future. And finally, they talk about taxing the e-commerce. But in Ghana, most of the e-commerce platform, it is cash on delivery. If you go to Jumia and everywhere, they tell you that it's a cash on delivery. And so if we want to tax e-commerce, we need to look at a way that we will be able to tax the actual transactions on e-commerce platforms.
Okay, so thank you very much. Please, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Apia Kusi Adomakon from CUTS.
Okay, thank you very much. So maybe before I come to you, sir, I'll go to the gentleman at the corner. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Sharif from the Ghana Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs. But recently, the government of Ghana has given me another work, which is to lead the Ghana Youth Federation, which is the constitutional body representing all youth. So that would lead me to my first question. Thank you very much, Deloitte, for this program. I think you have very strong panelists here talking about national issues, provoking thought when it comes to economy, but realize that there's no youth representation here. So I think that in the next...
Are you saying they are not youth?
Senior can pass for a young person, but he's not a youth. Even though youth, there are 3 things you can become a youth by in heart, age, and then your physics. So senior can pass for youth, but he's not a young person. We know ourselves. So yes, senior, and you are okay. Well, that was a very good defense, but next I would like to see a more clear representation. But Senor, this one goes to you. You first indicated a bit more about youth unemployment, which I was interested in. So I needed you to expatiate more. But I think that how can we move away from more or less, not to use the keyword whining, but looking at more practical solutions? Because a lot of time it seems we are speaking to the government, the politicians, by always decrying what we already know, which is a problem. My question to you is that what exactly can we do? Because I also advise the Minister of Youth, so I will take it to him. What can we do when it comes to youth unemployment? Because you gave very good presentation and figures there. We only have allocation in the budget, and we are talking about job creation, but we are not able to tell how we are going to create those jobs.
Okay. Thank you. So lastly, we will have this question and then the panelists will have their closing comment and response to the question that came. And then that will be the end.
Thank you very much. Akanyamike Jr., once again from the Ghana Hotels Association. My comment takes off from where you left, especially with the tourism and hospitality. I'm a trained agriculturist, but some way, somehow, I found my way into tourism and hospitality. And for the past 15 years, I have come to that understanding and appreciation that tourism and hospitality has a huge potential to transform our economy. Unfortunately, we are not giving it that attention that it deserves. And I wish our experts here will throw some light on why they think the government is not looking in that direction. Because if you look at the Dubai case that he mentioned, Thailand is also there. And if you look at the 1.3 million visitors we got for 2023-2024 or so, and what we received, which is about $4.8 billion. Now, that means that if you go higher, we are going to get more.
Yeah.
And then also, we are able to link our own development in terms of sanitation, infrastructure, education, all that, to the same tourism. So if we model our development on tourism, it means either way, we are going to benefit. And even the cost in managing the inflows is cheaper, because then you start from your country, you start distributing the money to the tour operators, to the airlines, the hotels at very low cost. Why are we not modeling our development on tourism? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have one question here. So maybe you can come up front and then just quick one. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm Cherry Emmanuel from Ghana Chamber of Construction Industry. Yeah, I can't hardly understand some of these figures which has been thrown out there by almost yourself and then the prof. You know, government keep painting a picture that the outlook looks very good, which is very promising for January to date. But let's ask ourselves, you say underspend. I don't understand. Underspend in which way? As contractors today, over 40 billion is in arrears. You haven't received any money. And then you come to tell us that you underspend and therefore they should clap for you. Why should I clap for you? Whilst my stomach is empty? I'm struggling to understand this. You underspend. In which way? Have you paid me? I have not been paid. 40 billion plus in arrears. And you say you have performed.
And that's more than the big push is 30 billion.
Now,
so
with the 30 billion, that's 2026. Which looks very promising. Because if the construction sector booms, manufacturing automatically follow along. Service sector, all the sectors move along, including agriculture sector, as Senor said earlier. But the challenge we have here is, do we have proper provisions lined out for this? Whilst you are thinking about the book push, what happens to the previous works that we have done? We work closely with the banks. We work closely with the industries, the manufacturing sector. So if you are unable to service those facilities, what then happens to them? We have a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have a point to make. Okay, Enoch, you can. Yeah. One, Justice.
Thank you very much, Deloitte. And
yourself.
I'm Patrick Kokofori. We all were Tekwafo. CEO of Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors. So I will want to pick it from the energy sector and some of the decisions that we are taking as a country. We all love it when the government came up with Ministry of Energy and Green Transition, hoping that it is going to translate into order.
Green, yeah.
You check last year alone, we subsidize premise fuel for 217 million Ghana cedis. This year, we are giving only 100 million Ghana cedis to aquaculture. So it means that if we were even to put all fishermen on payroll, I don't think it will even be 217 million. So it's about time that some of these policies that are based on politics of convenience, we need to be hard on and get it out of it. We're talking about increase in LPG acceleration, whereby the government is going to procure about 60,000 cylinders cook stove to enabling the green agenda. Yet you compare ourselves with the sub-region. We are the only ones who have got 15% tax on our LPG, whereas others are even subsidizing to push the greener agenda.
Encourage clean cooking, yeah.
Encourage clean cooking. In the name of also the 24-hour economy, most of the engagement that we've been having, Senor is very familiar with that sector. You check even the 1 city additional addition to the normal petroleum taxes that we are experiencing. And yet you go to the enclave that house almost 80% of the petroleum products that come into the country. The roads are no more trouble. Just the rains that the last 2 or 3 days, you cannot access terminals like Vanna. In the name of the 24-hour economy, we expect that the terminals are supposed to operate 24 hours. Those terminals, you can't plow an unmotorable road where there is no even security depots within all the key heart of thermal industrial area, the toll area getting to pond and all these areas. And then in one breath, you hear the Minister for Road on a major headline saying that these industries in these areas should be able to fund the construction of the roads. Clearly, the optics and the contradiction is too much. Another aspect that I want to touch on from the youth, the gentleman remembering the youth, Sharif. There is another aspect that our government has not been clearly about to nurture and harness the potential talent, and that is in the sports sector. If you check the number of youth who could gain employment through sports, and it is not by any means that when even Argentina went into that financial crisis and then their league called Apertura could not play, the Argentine government still injected $200 million into their league and introduced a tax on player export. We've budgeted for $150 million to participate in the World Cup, but yet all facets of our sporting, be it boxing, coach, boxing, athletics.
Who play the drums? Do you also give them allowance?
Yes. All those aspects, we've not invested in what we normally call the coach education program to really bring up coaches to nurture all those talents. That alone means that over 1 million talent are going to either be employed through sports or other opportunities.
Okay.
Not to talk about the area of research. Not a single of all the sectors and our ministers or ministries are funding research or partnering research that seek to put innovation. These are some of the key areas.
Thank you. So, Prof. Vera, you speak to the research side of things. Senor, you start, and then Wisdom, you have like 10 questions for you on tax, so I'll come back to you. Yeah.
The problem is big. You can't finish it in one day. And let me quickly deal with my brother Cherry. Take your time and look in the budget. There's a provision of arrears, 25 billion. As Chamber, go and start negotiating your share out of that quickly. Help you. I'm speaking as a former Chamber expert. So there's a provision somewhere for arrears. You should also remember the arrear problems. That, and one of the things I saw in the budget that got me excited is the audit of the arrears. Did you notice that 10 billion CDs were false claims? Your people are part. And it's not debate, it's fact. It's not that you are not part. Even I've also made claims for my people before. And when I went to the minister, I told him, we are not negotiating. Audit it, because I don't even know what I have brought. You understand? We represent our entities, but in the ultimate interest of our country. So we should start by trying to correct our attitude in our various sectors. Our road sector is heavily overpriced and heavily corrupt. I was member of the Ghana Highways Authority. I was finance committee chairman. When I was exposing it, when I was supposed to be reinstated, they delayed it until the kingdom come. We don't want to fix it, and it's the politicians, their problem. So you have solved that problem. That's a packet. The research, they have to talk some. Again, we just throw things, politicians, throw things. The thing politicians can understand is road. That's why I'm not surprised that they do the road, they can see construction. That's finished. But unlocking industries, they struggle. Again, because there's no proper research. Take agric. We are producing at 2.5 tons per hectare. America is doing it at 11. China is doing it at 10. How is it that you will not be importing more food from these people? How is it that these people will have fewer people producing more? But it needs research. So when you sit down, you should tell yourself, we want to unlock this industry. How do we make these parts of the industry competitive? Understand the supply chain, the cost structure. This textile thing, I don't want to hear. They should sit there and ask, how do we get this? What's the comparative advantage in the region? Is it just the plants that we have? If it's the plants that we have, it means that you can import, do it, and quickly compete. But who are you competing with? You are competing with China. Would that make you competitive? If it's not going to make you competitive, there should be thinking and research going into how do you unlock that? But this is economic research. Then there's actually more scientific research about what kinds of inputs in this manufacturing that we can actually swap from imports to local production. We used to produce cotton. We don't really produce cotton anymore. But that conversation we are not having. We want to do palm, which is also a good thing. I don't like. We still eat cooking oil, isn't it? But we need to also start asking, how can we start weighing something that we produce? Not just thinking about Ghana, but thinking about the sub-region and creating competitiveness across the chain. You take rice. If you don't make economic sense of the thing, you come and get glut, which is not glut. Have we stopped importing rice? We stopped importing rice, but we say we have glut. That should tell you a problem. Government cannot even tell us how its government-driven demand can unlock a sector. If you can't study this to know that you really need 181 kilos of food per person or per capita, and now disaggregate this 181 kilos per capita per annum of food that a Ghanaian needs into which sectors that you want to control and how you make it competitive, both for local consumption and for regional exports, then you're on your own.
Please close on the youth.
Finish on the youth. Yeah. I'm building the thing to that point. So starting the corruption must stop. We businessmen, we are part of it. Next one is for us to do proper research to unlock industries. As we unlock industries, youth get employed. Look at the structure of our economy. You have it heavily agrarian as far as the workforce is concerned. It doesn't make sense. And it tells you that the thing is not productive. Every developed country has actually shifted that dynamics. Using the leverage that we have, guess what? We have more agrarian land per capita, all right, than China does, than Vietnam does, than Netherlands has. But we import food from all these people. It doesn't make sense. What we should rather be asking ourselves is, how do we now get our agriculture efficient so that it can feed right into manufacturing, not industry? And I use my words carefully. When you look at our industry GDP, more than half is oil and mining. Extractive, more than that. The rest are scattering somewhere, and all these extractives, we add nothing again to it anyway. You understand? So it's manufacturing that can actually now carry and create room for more of our youth to be employed. Definitely services, riding on technology will be critical. We've had discussions with government. I think, this government listens more. Yes, it listens more. And they saw some things that it did. Trying to now look at the work abroad program. It's the same thing that comes back to your sports. The thing Patrick Ofori, Dr. Ofori just said about sports. We are not deliberate about it, but we are the same people going around and expecting the people to come and play for us if it's not going well.
But you should be deliberate about your policies. Beyond just equipping their coaches, we should be deliberate about how we facilitate their export and make income out of it. We should be deliberate about how we facilitate the export of medical doctors and many of the youth who are nurses sitting down waiting for 2-3 years without posting. But there are countries that are looking for nurses. How are we deliberate about this policy and let government facilitate, not necessarily control or run it? They'll come to you, Uncle. They are talking about the money supply and is it good, is it good? Where we are coming from, we would have been bent when an economy is heated out of excessive and reckless spending and expansionary policies that have not been sustained by fundamentals. This is the best way to deal with it. And I think it's been done more efficiently than we ever thought we would achieve. That is why the previous government's own forecast has been beaten in every single form. So still, we commend the government. If we did not do that, we cannot make savings on our interest expense so that we can create room to pay him.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me land. They land, they come. Well, you know, I won't go with you. I'll leave your matter for you. It's okay.
Okay. Please, okay, Prof, go ahead and then close us. Yeah.
For the research, well, it's clear what it is. Now, let me just share a brief story. So during my PhD, you're reading, I'm working on monetary policy and economic performance. So I'm excited and I come across theories. Oh, when the economy is doing well, the currency appreciates because, of course, the death of the economy's performance is a reflection of the businesses. So it means capital will even come into the country. Then I model Ghana plus the sisters. And then as the economy is going up, the currency is depreciating. Then I'm beginning to wonder. I read just about everything and everybody says it's a puzzle. Nobody's ready to explain it. But then you come across, you begin to probe further. You check your model, everything is fine. Then you realize that there are very different structural differences between where the theory was derived from and who we are. And so, and I've seen it in many cases in other jurisdictions, corporate governance is key. A firm has good corporate governance and it sells. Its stocks are like hot cake. Try corporate governance in Ghana, and in my Ghana parlance, they'll tell you whether it's the he-goat that gave birth to a cat or whatnot. It doesn't matter. So the structural differences mean that we need to research and find out what are the parameters that make ours tick. We can't take and copy, and sometimes that's what we just take and try to paste. And you realize that the points are not really matching, and so we're doing something that seems to work, but in the long run, it just keeps on shifting off. So government would definitely have to step in. In other jurisdictions, is massive collaboration between universities here and there. Models we are copying here were built by the universities with the collaboration of their government and relevant funding. Now I know they're trying to do the Ghana National Research Fund. How well we would work that out to make sure that it works for our good is another thing we want to look at. But really, research is critical. And until we research and find out how we can get tailor-made policies for us that fits us, we have a 70% informal economy. Why are they not formalizing? In fact, it's been revised now for me because, of course, when we look at it the way we have, but now let's say I'm going to take his 93. Now, how are we going to make our 93 work when it appears that most of the things we are trying to roll out are coming from economies that are mostly dominated by formal sectors? It's a complete mismatch. So, yes, research is critical. The universities are more than ready and willing to. If government is willing, I'm sure together we can find.
Thank you very much. So, Wisdom, finally.
Oh, I think there are many questions I cannot answer to them directly. General comments. For me, as a people, the tax paying that we have is a reflection of our attitude towards tax. And my analogy is the cocoa seller who, by 11 a.m., if she's not sold everything, she would be singing that if you don't take it today, you will take it tomorrow.
You come.
For me, if we are all paying our taxes, and the finance minister has said 20% is a starting point. If we get the compliance right, if we get the revenue levels right, then we can be talking about reducing it even further. We are better off in a 20% VAT economy which is stable and can transform, than a 10% VAT economy that will come crashing and we would have to do some of the very difficult decisions that we took in the past. So 3 things for me: we would have to work on the inefficiencies in terms of tax collection, mending the tax net, as I mentioned earlier. We would have to leverage technology. We have so much technology, we don't have excuses anymore. Then finally, we would have to make non-compliance costly for the informal sector, for the formal sector. Non-compliance should be costly. I've seen entities that have not filed their returns for 3 years, and they are able to exist in this country and transfer dividends. Not complying should be costly. Inefficiency should be worked on. Take our digital platform serious, use technology to collect tax, and make non-compliance costly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, thanks to Prof. Senor, Eric, and then Wisdom. Thank you very much. Maybe you will take a shot, maybe stand. Let's take a photo. Yeah.
Can we put our hands together one more time for a very good interactive panel discussion? I think it's been time well spent while they take their pictures. It's been time well spent. Thank you so much for making time to be with us. Special thanks to our online guests who have sent us a number of questions and comments. Your questions will be addressed, please. It's just a matter of time. That's why we are not able to address all of them here. But your questions will be addressed. Lastly, also, for those of us who were taking various pictures when the presentations were going on, please note that most of the presentations will be made available to you. And also, to emphasize, we have Deloitte's own analysis of the 2026 budget. We have an entire document prepared as well. So if we could have the QR code come up, please. You can just scan it at this QR code. It's the Deloitte analysis of the 2026 budget statement of the government of Ghana. You would see Deloitte's own perspective on the various sectors. A lot of the things that have been said here, you'll find a little more detail in this document. So please make time to download that and take a look. Also, to remind us, those of us in person here and also those of us online, there's a second QR code. Kindly scan that and do a quick feedback survey for us. We'd like to hear from you what you think we've done well, what we may not have done so well, what we can improve upon, so that we can get to do this better next time. We are pretty much done with all our announcements now. Once again, thank you so much for your time. It's exactly about 1:04 p.m. I don't think we are too much behind time. So thank you so much for making it here today. This has been the 2025 Deloitte Economic Dialogue. This time we discussed the 2026 budget. We will see you